Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second quarterfinals of the $100,000 N4C main event. We will have Mista versus Leenock battling it out in this best of 7. Spawning in on the left side of the map, we will have Mista playing as the Ruse in blue, and on the right side, we'll also have a Ruse player, Leenock, handling the Ruse in red. It is a Ruse mirror on high view, so the first couple of moments will be spent on looking for hunt. As you see, both players are running around trying to aggro wolves, trying to go for the hunt. On this map in particular, where you have so many wolves, you want to prioritize getting the wolves aggroed though, because the deer, while it's valuable, it's all about those wolves. The other thing that you will have to consider here is that despite the fact that the Rus can make the scouts on their hunting cabins, you still open with at least one extra scout from your town center, because if you only start making scouts by the time you get your hunting cabin up, it's going to be too late and your opponent is going to have the bounty advantage. Looks like Leenock will be able to aggro quite a lot of wolves over here. That's 2 that's coming in on the right side. He's only at 75 bounty right now. He's going for his own hunt. Other side, Mista has got the start a lot better. It's 150 bounty already for him, bringing back a couple more wolves. These two players did meet in the Swiss stage of the event, and in that one, it was day number 1 in the Swiss stage. In that one, Leenock won 3-1 against Mista in a best of 5. They did not play high view, however, so this is going to be a completely uncharted territory, and of course, it was also a set that was played in quotation marks long time ago. So for N4C standards, that was actually played almost a week ago. So obviously, both of the players have sort of learned a lot of things during N4C, and both the players now come in with a fresh and clean start into this best of 7. The two players had slightly different routes when it comes to the Swiss stage. Mista lost to Leenock in the first round, then he took down Viper, he takes down the Muslim, and then Mista was narrowly beaten by Beastie QT and then taken down by Marine Lord. So in the end, Mista took the 5th spot in the Swiss bracket, whereas Leenock got to the 4th spot. Leenock took down Mista, and then he lost to Beastie QT, lost to Vortex, defeated Viper, and last but not least, he defeated Lucifron. So in the end, Leenock finished the Swiss stage with a 3-2 send ending, whereas on the other side, Mista finished the Swiss stage with 2-3. It's number 4 versus number 5 on the Swiss bracket. But as I said, the difference was rather small between the two players. The most representative data that we have on their matchup comes from first week, where Leenock was able to take down Mista. With that being said, we have the Golden Gate coming in for both players, and it looks like we have 275 bounty. I think this is Mista's POV that we're looking at. Wait a minute, the colors are wrong. I'm just noticing the overlay colors are wrong. Notice that Leenock is marked as red, but if you select the players at the bottom, you should see different names. Hang on. Now, this is not the fault of the overlay. I think it is predetermined which player is which color. But if they accidentally pick the wrong colors, well, they don't really pick colors, but they join the lobby in the inappropriate order, their colors will be messed up. So I do want to check out because this might be wrong colors. I'm just now noticing that. It's a little difficult to spot because obviously you assume that the overlays are right. So let's see. It's possible that Mista is playing in a red. Hang on. You just need the observer to select one building or unit and we will see that. So far he hasn't done that. Golden Gate is complete for our red player here. For our blue player, at least for the time being. Yeah, red is Mista. You see that at the bottom. So I guess it is time for makeshift solutions. The border of the face cams. Yeah, there we go. There we go. It looks like the production crew just now flipped the colors as well. Okay, so I guess we're going back into this one, discussing the situation. It looks like Leenock had a slightly better start in the end, picking up the bounty, but the two players were rather comparable, as we do have Mista coming in here with a stable. I didn't see a stable just yet from Leenock. Instead, he's focusing a lot on his economy, dropping the wheelbarrow upgrade already. You could see a stable now being dropped by Leenock as well, so we'll have some Night Wars in here, which is going to be a very old school Rose thing. The thing is that in the very early days of Age of Empires 4, you could see a lot of Ruse mirrors like this one because it was all about the early knights at the beginning. And since in tournaments, players just played French mirrors in game number 1, oftentimes they ended up with Ruse mirrors in game number 2. Looks like we're going to have horsemen coming out here for Leenock, and for Mista, he is going for the knights. Professional scouts, of course, is an option for both, especially considering that they do have quite a lot of scouts to work with. And indeed, Mista is just now finishing professional scouts dropping a barracks, whereas on the other side, I wonder if Leenock tried to yoink some hunt away from the opponent. He's mining gold so he can start adding knights himself, and it looks like it's going to be just good old-fashioned knights and spearman warfare between the two. First knight coming in here from Mista, he gets a successful charge on that scout, and that should discourage the enemy from harassing those scouts carrying in the carcasses. Barracks now being dropped by Mista, as we do have still some sheep underneath the town center for him. One of the scouts is... Okay, now the other scout is bringing in a carcass. When Mista started bringing in carcasses, one of the scouts were not carrying anything, and I was wondering if he noticed that, and he did. So now he's once again going for the carcasses. Meanwhile, for Leenock, he's trying to contest this position, trying to make sure that his opponent isn't able to access food, because that could be a great way to start a snowball. But since Leenock is right now operating with just horsemen, his forces will be very inferior compared to the opponent's knights here. He might yoink one scout over here if Mista doesn't drop the carcass, but it looks like now the spearmen, the knights, will discourage any other aggression from Leenock. First patch of Huntables scooped up over here by Mista. He's still trying to push away those scouts, and he might get a kill here. Two scouts are very weak, but it looks like Leenock is going to be able to pull them away. Scouts outrunning the knights over here will mean that the scouts can get away from that, but Leenock almost lost one or two scouts over here, and it doesn't seem like he's actually ferrying in the hunt for himself. Instead, he's dropping a second town center. He has bought the stone he needed using the Golden Gate, and now he's playing two town centers. This could be an interesting combination and interesting setup, because Mista is definitely going to play one town center, fast castle, semi-fast castle style, or feudal age aggression. Whereas on the other side, Leenock just wants to boom. He's going to play a very defensive game, and he would just play on two town centers. Now his gold mine is quite exposed, and that could be a source of concern, and this is something that Mista could potentially exploit. Mista is banking up a ton of resources, so fast castle is not impossible by any means. 400 gold, 400 food in the bank already for him. Whereas for Leenock, of course, he's going to focus on the two town center play. Now, what would Mista do if he gets to castle age? Of course, the first thing that you have to think about is picking up relics, and that would be a great way to compensate for a lower villager count, being able to secure the majority of the relics. And that's part of the reason, as we do have a bit of a scuffle here between the spears and the knights, one of the knights freaking out for a brief moment. So one of the things that you have to consider is that if you go for two town centers with the Ruse, you will delay your feudal age, and if you do that, this is going to result in your opponent picking up the relics, and in a Ruse mirror, the relic control is a key factor. Spearman once again pushing back the knights here, as we do have still quite a lot of resources being banked up by Mista. After adding that initial two knights and some spearmen, he pretty much stopped making armies, so this is indeed a semi-fast castle from him. Looking at the relic spots, those are quite evenly distributed between the two players. You have basically 4 in this middle line in between the two. Knights and Spearmen still assembling in front of Leenock's base. Leenock, if he stops making army, he's going to get to castle age rather fast, and it looks like it's going to be the good old-fashioned horse archer play from Mista here. He's charging with the knights, he's going to get one villager, potentially a second villager goes down. Leenock is very slow to react, and he's going to lose that third villager potentially. The knight swings its sword, and with that, 3 villagers go down here from Leenock. In a mirror matchup, that's a disaster. If you look at the villager count right now, it's basically dead even between the two players, and that's never a good sign for a player that has been playing on two town centers for a while. Looks like we do have a force on the right side, mostly horsemen from Leenock, coming in and swooping around. Might be able to get 1 or 2 villager kills, but you do have to keep that in mind, that the horsemen don't have a ton of damage output, so it's a little easier for Mista to run away with the villagers from horsemen than it is to run away from knights. Blacksmith coming in, and now Leenock is going to see the multiple archer ranges. He should know what's coming. Against Ruse, if you see 3 ranges, it should be obvious that it's going to be castle age into horse archers. Mista is building the... Is that the high trade house I'm seeing? It seems like it. 1 villager goes down from Mista for the horseman. No, it's the abbey. It's a somewhat unorthodox position, if I may say so, because it's quite far away from the town center, so it's going to take some effort to finish it, in fact. Not exactly sure what's the motivation of building it all the way on the left side. If it was the high trade house, it would be a great spot, but it's the abbey. So I'm somewhat puzzled why it's being built there, and Mista is getting punished for that. Mista is getting punished for it really badly, because one thing Mista didn't really have back at home was army, and now he's getting pushed back into his base. Leenock is going to delay that castle age quite a bit. Now the horsemen and the spearmen come back home, so the landmark will eventually be completed, but this is going to slow down Mista's castle age advance quite a bit. Meanwhile, we saw a lot of villagers being pushed forward by Leenock. The fact that he's not going for professional scouts means that he's not ferrying in deer, so he's having issues with food. And of course, he can drop the hunting cabin on the berries, but that's not super effective for a Ruse, simply because the hunting cabins are very expensive. Now here's a big push coming in though, and Mista could be in trouble, because one thing that Mista doesn't really have right now is an army that's capable of fighting off the enemy. If he starts adding spears, he should still be fine because the opponent has a minimal amount of archers only over here, and he wants to start adding foot archers? Horse archers? I don't see a single horse archer coming out from Mista just yet. He's queuing up a couple right now. Farms being added, however, for Leenock. This could be the saving grace, to be honest, for Mista. The fact that his opponent is running low on food is going to slow down the advance of Leenock here, and that gives him a window to fight this off. As the horse archer numbers start appearing on the battlefield, you see that Leenock feels a sense of urgency. He's going to try and fight this one. The spearmen are working to decent efficiency here for Mista, and he's taking down the horsemen. Horse archer numbers steadily increasing, and now Mista is in a commanding position. Leenock is not far away from Castle Age, but this aggression will be repelled. Currently, it's 10 villagers lead for Leenock, so he's got a pretty decent villager lead. But soon, he's going to find himself potentially harassed by those horse archers, because that's where things are getting annoying. Those villagers on the berries, the villagers on the gold, the villagers potentially on this future gold or hunt, those could all be targets for those horse archers. And behind this one, of course, you will have Mista collecting the relics. So he's already bringing back the relic. You gotta wonder if, especially if he gets 5 relics, if he will be cheeky and try to use one of those relics to convert villagers. That's something that you can think about if you have 5 relics especially. Use one relic to just try to sneak up a conversion on the enemy wood line or something like that. That could be a high risk, high reward play. And if you got 5 relics, I think that's something that you can justify. For now, he's got 1 relic only, and he's not bringing in a second one just yet. But those villagers are now dangerously exposed. And if Mista senses that his opponent has issues with the food income, it's a very legitimate option for him to just try to hit those berries, and that could be a game over style attack over there. The horse archers are heading straight towards those berries, and Mista is going to see them. Soon you will have to bury a lot of villager over here, because so many dead bodies will be out there, many of them soon to be buried underground. It's going to be 5 villagers taken down. Looks like the rest of the villagers do get away. A 6th one could be picked off, but that's a great rate for Mista. He cuts into that villager deficit, and now the high trade house is coming in here for Leenock. Mista could see that. If Mista sees that, that's probably going to be a disaster. It is going to be a disaster. Horse archers now moving towards those villagers. The landmark is going to be completed. The question is the price of that. 2 villagers goes down. 3rd one goes down. If Mista spots it a little faster, it would have been even worse for Leenock. But Leenock's villager advantage is shrinking and shrinking thanks to those horse archers being very effective. And I think the new push is already coming in. That group over there in the middle, that's probably a new group of horse archers marching towards the base of the enemy. And at this point, it's all going to be about the fact that Mista is going to be pursued left and right by the army of Leenock. And behind this one, Mista will just keep raiding and raiding with those horse archers. He has 18 horse archers on the battlefield right now in groups of like 7 and 10. And he's picking up the relics, that's the bigger thing. 3 relics already in control for him. And he's dropping hunting cabins all across the map. Those hunting cabins, of course, will be really helpful as well, because they will give you a pretty nice trickle of gold over time, and it's a little difficult to find them. Looks like we do have some hunting cabins up for Leenock as well. His height rate house is not in the influence radius of another hunting cabin, which is very important because hunting cabins within each other's influence radius, they nullify each other's gold production. And it looks like now we have a siege workshop coming in, some knights could be added. Those knights will be a great buffer in front of those horse archers, as now Mista isn't massing around, he's going for the sacred sites. He knows very well that this is an advantage that he can press onto. Drop a tower in the middle, start securing sacred sites, and force your opponent to make a move, because it's all about that. Making sure that you capitalize on this advantage as fast as possible, and you can do that by picking up relics, you can do that by continuously raiding your opponent with horse archers, as we are seeing by Mista right now, and of course you can do that by capping sacred sites and forcing your opponent to react to that. Horsemen will be dispatched to deal with those horse archers, so they won't be able to kill the villagers out here. High trade house, of course, will give some deer for Leenock to work with, so that's going to compensate for his lack of accessible food. And of course, it's going to guarantee that he gets the tier 3 bounty. Here come the horse archers. Villagers jump into the tower here. That should push back Mista for the time being. Looking at unit compositions, now you see that at the top of the screen, Leenock has 5 horsemen, 2 knights, 3 spearmen, and 4 archers. Not spectacular. This one is looking a lot scarier. I do count 2 men-at-arms, 3 warrior monks, but 25 horse archers, some knights, and 2 mangonels. Especially on a map that has a lot of stealth forests, 2 mangonels could be devastating because your opponent might not even see them before it's too late. Looks like now Mista is creeping up with towers. This is something that you commonly do. The Mongol is going to unleash fire on the villagers. They juke it and they jump into the tower. Tower now has a spring golden placement on it. So for now, Mista is going to play it safe and call off the Mongol. Warrior Monk heading to the north. That's going to be relic number 4 captured by Mista. In fact, he already has the 4th one under his control. So I guess he's going for relic number 5 here. He could have all 5 under his control, which would be, of course, massive. Knights are now diving in. They ignore the tower fire. They will take down what seems to be one villager. A second one could be taken down here. This is more like a probing attack by Mista. He just wants to see what his opponent has. He has 2 knights left over, and why not kill 2 villagers? And also distract the opponent. That's the bigger thing. Distract in the middle, force Leenock to send his forces over there, and then head north and hit the food eco. Remember that high trade house is always a place where villagers will be nearby, because you want to take the hunt nearby. So Mista is pulling the forces of Leenock to the front, and then he's jumping on the high trade house, and that's exactly what we're going to see if our observer shows that. Indeed, here they go. Horse archers also trying to cut off the escape path for the villagers, and that's just a massacre. That's a slaughter coming in from the horse archers. And the very moment Leenock adjusts his army over here, Mista is going to try and get a conversion here in the stealth forest. That's the plan. He was trying to hide that warrior monk, trying to get a sneaky conversion, but that's not going to work out. But while he's doing this, while he's fighting this one, he's pushing the middle. That's that 2-pronged attack that he's so deadly with. And even though some horse archers will be now cleaned up over here, he could even lose the warrior monk, he's pushing deep into the opponent's base on the front. And this is not something that our observer or even Leenock was noticing. There were mangonels there were knights over there, and you could easily look at, indeed, just some spearmen being sent in, villagers on the gold mine were harassed, and ultimately, the villager count is still comparable between the 2 players. Mista with 4 relics, however, and he's the one with the majority of the map under his control. And if you look at the resource income per minute, that's actually a little more telling, because not only do you have even amount of villagers between Mista and Leenock, of course Mista has the sacred sites, Mista has the relics, and Mista has hunting cabins all across the map, which is giving him a very nice gold trickle as well. We're talking about probably 150-ish gold by now from those hunting cabins per minute. That's admirable. So if you look at the ecos, those are heavily in the favor of Mista right now. Gotta love the move to take down the boar. This way, you're going to have extra bounty from that boar, and you're going to have access to food. Whereas you will have the horse archers now finding the villagers of Leenock here. Once again, a disaster. And Mista knows very well that his opponent is struggling for food. So he's going to send in the horse archers from the left side, hit the food eco. He's trying to do a push on the right side as well with the horse archers, and he's going to take a good fight. The counterattack here from Leenock could do a lot of damage inside Mista's base, however, and Mista hasn't noticed that so far. Mista himself starting to lose villagers, and that's a disaster if he allows all those knights to kill his lumberjacks. Mista isn't noticing it. That could be a game being lost on a matter like that. Still no reaction from Mista, is down to 47. Suddenly there is a 15 villagers lead in the hands of Leenock. Mista, could he throw away the game just by not looking at his villagers? He's not noticing it. Mista is not noticing it at all, and suddenly he's behind by 20 villagers. The horse archers require a lot of babysitting. You have to constantly control them, make sure they don't run into enemy forces. And Mista didn't notice that his villagers are being killed. He's down to 35 villas. What an absolute blunder by Mista. The only saving grace for him right now is that he's got the relics, he's got the sacred sites, and he still has the horse archers to raid the enemy with. But holy potatoes, could that have been a lost game. At this point, Mista can be happy if he wins this game. He was in a great position, and just 5 knights did so much damage to make sure that now Leenock is back on track at minimum. The good news, as I said, for Mista is that he still has the relics, he still has the sacred site, so he probably can avoid a complete disaster over here. But this was a massive, massive blunder, and this is something that gives a great window for Leenock to recover. Leenock still operating with a lot of knights here, and now for Mista, he's gonna have to start regrouping his horse archers here. Because the thing is that small groups of horse archers won't be able to do well against larger groups of knights, so you have to have one big group. of horse archers that can take direct engagements against those knights. Mista is down to 31 villagers. He's behind by 24. Looking at the resource income per minute, now that's better for Leenock, but once again, you have to respect the fact that Mista still has map control. He's got 2 relics, or no, 2 sacred sites and 4 relics. He's got the board to work with as well, which is a ton of extra food. But his opponent is on 2 town centers as well. So that villager lead is just growing and growing for Leenock at this point. Mangonel starting to shell those farms. No reaction so far by Leenock. He could easily snipe that Mangonel. There is no one guarding it. New towers being made by Mista right now. If you're Mista, you could even justify adding a second town center now, because you can still keep raiding your opponent, and it would be immensely valuable to get a second town center up so that you can somehow recover your villagers lost. That's the 5th relic being brought in, if I'm not mistaken, by Mista. That would be big. Or, no, that's not. That's a new relic. He picked up a relic from his base. He will try a villager conversion. I think he's realizing that, oh shoot, I lost so many villas. He needs to try a villager conversion. Leenock now launching counterattack with knights here. This is something that once again could be painful for Mista. And the only thing here for Mista is that he basically has no villagers to lose. He has the second town center though. That's the smart thing to do. He needs to know. He needs to know that he lost so much that he needs to find a way to recuperate those losses. Knights are coming in now. This time around, they'll be met on the battlefield by the knights and the horse archers of Mista, so they won't be able to do that much damage. They do pick off 2 villagers. That's a nice start for them, and they will idle some more. Now villagers are being pulled by Leenock to try and take down that Mangonel. Tower Fire is going to help a lot here, but ultimately, the villagers will take down the Mangonel. There are some blue dots up north, and that's a gold mining operation, although there is a board nearby as well, which means that we are going to have a decent amount of food and gold accessible there for Leenock. He's by far the player with the higher villager count. Ecos are rather comparable, thanks to the fact that at least Mista has the sacred sites and the relics. Knights still being active here for Leenock. He knows very well that he needs to stop a push and force his opponent to defend. Because as long as he's counterattacking his opponent, there was the monk. That's the monk that was planning a Vololo, and I wonder if it's going to be coordinated with another attack. Because one thing that you can do is strike from one side, distract the opponent, and then try to do a Vololo simultaneously. Because you won't get away with a Vololo in the eco if your opponent can pay attention to it. But if your opponent cannot pay attention, you could easily get away with one. Now, there's a big blue boa coming on the right side. I wonder what exactly that is. Could be knights. Leenock does have 41 spearmen. Holy smokes. That's a lot. But the horse archers will just pick them off. So you gotta wonder if that's the right thing to do. Here come the horse archers. And I think there is gonna be a Vololo attempt coming from the north. That's Mista with the 1 relic. He's got a 2nd relic as well. There has to be a relic in this direction as well that he's trying to use the Vololo. He's going to pop the Vololo right now. Villagers trying to flee, and it looks like the warrior monk is not going to get the Vololo out there. The other side, I wonder if there was any attempt to do that. But for now, Leenock's eco is going to get pushed by horse archers, so even though they won't be converted, there's a chance that they will just be killed by the horse archers. Volo attempt here on 3 gold miners. That's going to be a little lackluster, but at least he gets that successful. So that's 3 extra villagers for Mista and 3 less for his opponent. But now Mista's eco is getting raided by quite a lot of knights. Spearmen also joined the fun over here, but those will be taken down quite easily by horse archers. Horse archers that, however, are nowhere to be found. Because at this point, Mista is focusing all his efforts at pushing the opponent's base, and now Mista is at the risk of losing that 2nd town center. He has to send back his horse archers to deal with those spears before the town center goes down. Town center lit ablaze, and it seemed like Mista didn't notice that. Mista doesn't seem to notice that his town center is gone, because otherwise he probably would have tried repairing it at least. He's buying some food for himself, buying some food. He's definitely struggling to access the resources he needs for horse archers, and suddenly, Leenock is in a great position. 102 population against 59. That counterattack with the knights might have done more damage than it initially seemed, because now Mista is on the back foot. He still has the relics working for him, but that's the only positive thing that you can say about his position. His food eco is a train wreck, his lumberjacking is a disaster, and he's down to 31 villagers only. Now, if he can keep up the pressure on Leenock's eco, he might still be able to carve out a lead in a very massy game. But right now, he's gonna need a massy game to deal with this one. because now his eco is quite a bit of a train wreck, to be honest. Stealth forests, of course, helping immensely for both sides, hiding their armies, concealing their movement, and that's going to help immensely, sneaking up some forces on the opponent. Part of the reason why Mista wasn't expecting the push on that town center was that his opponent was sneaking up the forces through the stealth forest. Looks like the relic will be dropped here to try and save the warrior monk. Spearmen are still pursuing, and they will poke down the warrior monk out here. I think that was the relic that Mista used to try and get the conversion going. Villagers that were probably converted, those are now running away. Mista is still at 31 villagers though, so even if he managed to get a second successful conversion, which we did not see, he's basically at 29 villagers, no economy. He's got the relics, and he's got the sacred sites, but the sacred sites are something that the opponent can neutralize, and the eco of Mista is just non-existent. 34 food per minute, 0 wood per minute. He's got all the gold, but that's the only thing that he has. You gotta wonder, you're starting to wonder if Mista is going to start losing this game. And this is, I think, not the first time where Mista lost a game on losing so many villagers, so he definitely had a tough time diagnosing counterattacks and just noticing them. I don't really blame him, because managing horse archers is very, very APM and micro-intensive. You have to focus on your horse archers all the time, otherwise they will get massacred by spearmen. Is that a castle? That's gotta be a castle. That's gotta be a castle there for Mista. He's trying to pull villagers here, but can he fight this? Or did he try the landmark snipe? Don't tell me. If he tries a landmark snipe at 15 villagers, that would have been a disaster. It looks like he's typing the GG. Leenock is going to take him down, and really, you can just go back into the middle of the game. That one counterattack, that pretty much killed Mista. Because from that point on, he was playing from a disadvantage, and I'm fairly certain that he has to be frustrated with himself, because he just lost a game that was won. He had basically even villager numbers compared to the opponent. The opponent pinned inside his base, Mista having large groups of horse archers, 4 relics, potentially 5, 2 sacred sites, and suddenly 5 knights come over, and he just lost so many lumberjacks. By the time he noticed what was going on, it was too late, and that was something that gave such a large window for Leenock. And that was the window that Leenock used to push that dagger even deeper and finish off the game. It's just one momentum switch, Mista basically losing half of his economy. The good news for Mista is that it's not like he was completely devastated by Leenock here. It's not like he was beaten to oblivion. It's not like he was losing a very decisive battle. It was more about the fact that he made one grave mistake and he loses the game. So the good news for Mista is that he played well for 95% of the game, and if he plays like that in the upcoming games, he's got a good shot at winning this. The bad news is that Leenock just got a point for a game that shouldn't have been won by him, because Mista had a huge advantage. This should have been a victory for Mista, and this is something that could haunt him if this set gets close. Welcome to game number 2 between not Lista and Meenock, but Mista and Leenock. On the right side, it is going to be the French for Mista in blue, and on the left side, we will have Leenock picking the Mongols in red. The map seems to be just standard dry Arabia, so Mista is going to pop his French on this map, which is a little surprising, I would say, I'm not saying off meta, because this is not necessarily a meta selection question. It's more about the fact that Mista so far has been using his French on King of the Hill. That was the tendency for him in the last 1 or 2 days. So it's a little surprising to see him using the French on Arabia, although definitely not unprecedented, French being a very powerful open map civilization, but a civilization that has a tough matchup against the Mongols, unless the Mongols have a terrible map to work with. Now, Leenock is going to have a couple of shots with that Khan on that scout. The scout shouldn't really be concerned about that one. What's more important for Mista is that he's able to find the base of the opponent. Now, do note that the colors were flipped up. That's because initially Mista was supposed to be the blue player and Leenock was supposed to be the red player. But because, as I said, I think they messed up the colors in the lobby, now we're seeing the appropriate colors. Leenock is going to be playing red, and his opponent, Mista, is going to be playing blue. For now, it looks like Leenock is only operating with one con, and one thing that he wasn't really successful with was finding sheep for himself. Now, he has dropped the barracks, and his Ovu is right next to the town center, which means that we're going to see Dark Age aggression, something that you commonly see against the French. French, of course, being very vulnerable, because if they lose access to their gold mines, they could be in trouble. But this is concerning for Leenock for one reason. If he's going for Towers aggression over here with Spearmen, this is first of all a build that Mista has a very good response to, and I'm curious to see if he's going to pop that. Because he faced this one on a map like King of the Hill, and what he did was basically go scouts, and I think it was either spears or archers, but the idea was that he used the scouts as a cheap torch unit to take down towers with. The bigger concern for Leenock is that by going for the barracks and the spearmen and even the towers, he's not able to make pastures that easily, and as you could see, he basically had no sheep to work with. So one thing that could be very concerning for Leenock is his food eco going forward. Mista, on the other hand, was very successful collecting sheep, so he won't be that much reliant on hunt or berries, as the first tower is coming in for Leenock. Even if he towers the berries, as I said, his opponent is going to have a reasonable food income from the sheep for quite a long time, so that's not going to be a major concern. Looks like the tower will be placed most likely at the left of the wood line. This is not something that Mista has seen up until now, but I think he might be able to catch those spears. Indeed, he catches the spears, he gets a confirmation on the tower. He's not going to be able to pull villagers to take this down because the spearmen are nearby, but he's going to at least see that his opponent is here, and he's trying to pull villagers, actually. That is a little overly ambitious. Against those spears, you probably don't want to do that, and indeed, he's going to fall back for the time being, trying to delay that tower as much as possible. He's going up the feudal age with the School of Cavalry, and it looks like Leenock did get some punishment on that spawn spearman from the town center, so one of the spears are actually heavily damaged. And I really wonder, if Mista is going to play the scouts play here once again. Because the easiest way to get rid of those towers for Mista right now is to make a couple of scouts and burn them down. Of course, he would need some archers to get rid of the spearman first. First tower is up. Of course, Leenock is still in Dark Age, so he can't go for the arrow slits in placement. He can garrison the spearman inside, as you are going to have the archer range now coming in, and Mista is queuing up scouts. It's going to be the good old-fashioned scouts archer play. Now, the last time Mista used this against the Mongols, one thing that was different is that the Mongol player's Ovu was quite exposed in that scenario, so Mista could launch a counterattack and burn down the Ovu quite easily. That's not going to be applicable for this scenario, but when the first archer comes out, it's very possible that this tower is going to get denied from Leenock. Leenock is trying to burn down the mining camp, but that's not a concern right now. For Mista, he's going to try and get the villager killed. Archer almost out, and when the first archer pops out, those spearmen will lose a lot from their efficiency. Here comes the archer. He will try to focus down that one villager. You see the archer dancing around here. As the spearmen are pulled towards the archer, you could try using your scouts to take down the villager, but instead, you can just go for the arrow tower. It doesn't have an arrow slits in placement, and things are falling apart for Leenock. His villagers are nearly getting picked off close to the tower on the right, and the tower on the left is not garrisoned, so it is going to be taken down so easily. Look at this. The tower isn't even having any resistance, because there is no one garrisoned. So this is an easy tower kill here for Mista, buying himself a lot of time. And now he has the option to jump on the second tower in a matter of seconds. And while he cannot do damage to the Ovu, he could definitely damage the gold mining of Leenock. And oftentimes when you go for this Dark Age aggression with the Mongols, you want to get to fast castle. That's not going to be an option here for Leenock. And you see, he's realizing that this scenario here with all the towers, this is not going to favor him at all. And he's just disengaging with that villager. He's sneaking out the way to the right side, trying to save that low HP Vil. Speaking of whom, looks like Mista is on a hunt. Mista is on a mission. He doesn't want to let that guy get away, and he's going to get the kill. Valuable pick over here, but it was more about, the momentum, or just, imposing your will on the opponent, really. Saying, okay, you try to tower rush me, I'm going to kill your villager. I'm not going to let you get away with that. Feudal Age is being rushed up right now by Leenock. He's going up with the Deerstones. 4 spearmen still garrisoned in the towers, popping out right now to deal with the scouts. Archers should be able to deal with them. Mista will lose 1 scout. That's a nice pickup here from Leenock, but he's slowly losing the tower. Now he's going to start focusing down the archers, which is the right thing to do. You want to make sure that you kill the archers, because the scouts will just get healed back up once you disengage with them. Looks like the archers are all still alive. Spearman now popping out, and Mista, he can just disengage and wait for the tower to get burnt down. Looks like he's going to lose another scout and another archer, but that's basically it. And with that, all the spearman aggression is now cleaned up. So what's the plan now for Leenock? He's apparently switching to horseman, as you see on the right side of the screen. And he's also grabbing the hardened spearman upgrade. So it is going to be the horseman spearman unit composition, which is still something that's very dangerous against the French. And that's something that you have to respect if you're playing French here. But it's also something that I think TheMista has the window to react to, because Leenock invested quite a lot in that early aggression, and it didn't really materialize. TheMista wasn't really set back. The thing I'm wondering if TheMista will go professional scouts now. He's got so many scouts that he could easily justify going for it. For now, food eco is a bit of a question mark still for Leenock. He's adding pastures now, but as I said before, he doesn't have a ton of sheep to work with at the start, and because of that, he had to start adding pastures very early, and he doesn't really have a ton of income from those pastures yet in terms of sheep. But he's got the Ovu powering those, so he doesn't need that many pastures for the time being. Looks like the scouts will just jump on the gold miners. They're like, okay, I do have enough scouts over here to fight this one. Horsemen will be the response here from Leenock, and this is something that TheMista will spot. But I wonder if TheMista's gonna have one or two knights being sent over just to start getting some harassment done. And indeed, there is going to be the professional scouts build coming in from TheMista. He's realizing that he's got so many scouts that he can just ferry in the deer here without problems. Well, given the fact that he's able to eliminate all those horsemen pursuing his scouts. Horseman with a slight overextension running into the town center fire. TheMista's response to the horseman will be a couple of spearmen, as we will have him moving towards the hunt on the north. That's the easier one to access. The other one is quite far away, so that's going to take quite a lot of effort to bring in. But one thing is sure, with the hunt being brought in here for TheMista, his food eco is going to be great. On the other side, it looks like Leenock has no issues with food either. He's got the appropriate amount of sheep underneath the town center. And for now, it looks like we are going to see some horseman spearman play, although Leenock is banking up resources. So one has to wonder whether Leenock is just thinking about buffering up a potential attack from the French here with the spears and the horsemen, and then just going straight to Castle Age, because he seemed to be piling up resources for that. Now, TheMista is also seeing that his opponent is not playing super aggressive, so TheMista himself is piling up a decent amount of resources, already 300 food in the bank, 200 gold, and increasing. Other side, Leenock banking up resources as well, but it looks like he's now dropping a second barracks. I wonder if he actually wants to switch into a full feudal pressure with mass spearmen, realizing that his opponent doesn't have a ton of archers, or this is a preemptive move, or not even preemptive move, but basically a move that's going to set him up for men-at-arms once he gets to Castle Age, because he's banking up a ton of gold and food as well, so I really wonder if he just wants to go to Castle, but in that case, that next barracks being dropped might be a little premature. Blacksmith will be placed to the north. That's closer to the Ovu. He cancelled it at the southern part of the town center. And now we got some walls going for TheMista. That's a nice way to do this. He's going to limit the movement of those horsemen. This is not something that Leenock was expecting. He still might have a window to jump on those lumberjacks. However, here he comes. And we will have the horseman now jumping on the lumberjacks. Khan pops the speed arrow to boost the movement speed of the horseman. And the villagers stop. The villagers just stopped there for a brief moment, and that's going to be an absolute blunder for TheMista once again. Two villagers getting taken down here. A third one is also going to go down, with one horseman only lost here for Leenock. He's going to lose a second one. Nope. He gets away. He's going to lose a second one in the end. But still, that's two villagers down once again from TheMista. Oh boy. That could have been avoided. Not exactly sure why the villagers stopped, but a bit of a panic here for TheMista creeping in, because the last 1 minute wasn't so spectacular for him. Now, he's got a scout looking over that gold mine of the opponent, so he knows very well when he could strike with those knights, and this could be a nice window for him to use. He's got some knights roaming the map, and both players getting close to Castle Age. TheMista should also have a bit of a Castle Age advantage. Now, normally you go up to the guild hall with the Castle Age landmark if you're French in 1v1s, but I wonder if TheMista pulls a slightly off-meta choice going with the Royal Institute. I don't think that he will, but if there's any person that would do that, that would probably be TheMista. He definitely brings a couple of surprises with him, and that is the guild hall, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, it is. So, just standard, normal French stuff here for TheMista. Looks like he lost one archer in the middle of the map, but behind this one, his knights are roaming the map of the opponent. Leenock trying to cut off the escape path for those knights. So far, Mista wasn't able to get any kills for them, so he currently maintains a 2 villagers lead thanks to the fact that he's training villagers faster, and he's bringing back the carcasses. That's the 3rd hunt that he's picking up, and that's going to fuel his food economy for quite a long time. Mista's knights are clashing into the horsemen over here. He's realizing that he needs to kill the horsemen or at least distract them so that the scouts get away with the carcasses, and that is exactly what he's doing right now. He's just distracting all of those horsemen and the spearmen so that his scouts can get back home with some of the carcasses. On the way to Castle Age is going to be Leenock as well. I assume the step redoubt is the landmark of choice. Mista up to castle, and now he's got 2 stables worth of production. I'm seeing some men-at-arms, I'm seeing some knights and some archers being mixed in, so a little bit of everything here, so to say, for Mista. Whereas on the other side, I wonder if Leenock will just go full man-at-arms. Now, one thing that you have to be careful about with here, if you're playing the Mongols, is that if you go for very heavy men-at-arms Lancer composition, your opponent has the Arbaletry, and that is a great response to everything here. Nice setup in the middle for Mista. He's hiding that force in the Stealth Forest. He's waiting to jump on the opponent, and this could be a great ambush setup here, to be honest. Leenock is up to castle, and Leenock is now adding just pure men-at-arms. Army numbers are looking way healthier for Mista, and remember, the gold mine is quite exposed for Leenock. And that is probably the place to strike at for Mista. Because now, going into Castle Age, the Mongol player will be heavily reliant on gold as well, and that's something that Mista could exploit. A couple of horsemen were sent north by Leenock. Mista also had some knights going over there, as we do have food on the guild hall. That's a very common thing to do if you don't have a lot of farms set up, because this way, even if you somehow run out of food underneath your town center, you run out of sheep, you run out of hunt, you can still adjust and just get some food for yourself from the guild hall, and that's going to buy you some time to set your food eco up in terms of farming. The Veteran Royal Knight upgrade is now in for Mista, so he's gonna have the Castle Age Knights working for him. He's sending over some men-at-arms, and it looks like he's trying to hit the opponent from behind here. This could be an interesting angle to attack from, because there isn't really a ton of eco here, but this could be a perfect diversion. If he uses this as a diversion and hits the gold mine from the right side instead with some knights, that could be great, but it looks like he might be trying to go for the Ovu. Ooh, the new Ovu is just now being built. I assume that's a new Ovu, but the other Ovu wasn't even depleted. That's so weird. What is Leenock doing here? He built a new Ovu without finishing the first one. And the reason why that's so weird is because now this is much more exposed to the opponent than the previous one was. He didn't need to replace this, and now he just put himself in a very difficult position because suddenly he has to fight for his own Ovu here. We got some man-at-arms, we got some archers over here. One thing that Mista doesn't really have is Arbaletry on the battlefield, so the Lancers from our red player will be quite effective. Archers focusing down the spearmen, the men-at-arms will trade against each other, but the spearmen aren't really able to reach the French cavalry here, and that's exactly what Mista needs. He needs to make sure he focuses down all of those spearmen before the cavalry can engage. Some of his knights were picked off by the men-at-arms and the spearmen, but ultimately the spearmen disappear from the battlefield, and now those French knights will start dominating because the men-at-arms of the Mongol players won't be taking a good fight against all of those knights, and we are getting back to the position where that Ovu is just very exposed, and we really gotta wonder what exactly the motivation of Leenock was dropping that Ovu elsewhere. He also seems to have issues with food, because you could see for a brief moment that his villagers are a little clustered up underneath the town center. I wonder if he's got some idols, because when you have so many carcasses on top of each other, sometimes it's difficult for the villagers to access them. And it looks like the Ovu is getting burnt down, all the buildings being moved. And this is going to be a great diversion that Mista is using to open up the possibility of hitting that gold mine. That is exactly going to be the case. And with that, some of the gold miners will be picked off. 2 towers helping a lot here with the defense, and there's only a couple of knights here, so you can't really sustain a fight underneath the towers, especially with one of those towers having a spring golden placement on it. Is that a second town center I see from Leenock? It seems to be the case. So he's now behind by 10 villagers, but he's gonna have a window to recuperate those losses, given the fact that he can somehow stop this bleeding. Because this is the problem right now for Leenock. He's just stuck inside his base, he's making a mangonel, he's at 70 military population right now, and though he has 2 town centers, his map control is extremely limited. And this is something that Mista could utilize. Mista is mining stone. Mista wants a forward castle. He's not messing around. He knows very well that this could be the moment to push that dagger deep enough to finish the opponent. He's pulling a lot of villagers. He's putting a lot of villagers. That's at least 15, 20. But I like the commitment. I really like the commitment. It's risky because if you lose all of those villas, you might lose the game. But you need to make sure a castle goes up here. You can't mess around. You fail that castle, you're screwed because you're going to lose a lot of villagers and you're also going to fail with the forward. Here comes the castle. That's going to be right on the gold mine for the opponent. Other gold mines for Leenock are at the back, but those are definitely raidable. Here comes the castle. The Springald Tower is able to reach the villagers here, so you will have to send in your knights to tank up some of that damage. Castle coming up at 25%. Mongols setting up here for Leenock. His force is mostly men-at-arms and spearmen, but first the knights have to take down that Mongol, otherwise the archers cannot engage. But I think the distraction is large enough here for Mista to be able to get that castle up. He didn't even want to fight this one, he just wanted to make that castle happen. And now he's gonna be in a great forward position. He can start picking off all those vultures in the gold mine. That's going to push Leenock deep back into his base. And Mista is still on stone, so a second castle is not an impossible option. And you see the knights are swinging around. They know very well that the backup gold mines are at the back, and this is exactly where Leenock is gonna go. Knights are also accompanied by some scouts, so this is going to give some extra vision for Mista. Easier to acquire targets this way. And they also give some extra torch damage, let's not forget that. As you see, indeed, the step readout is being readjusted to the left side. For now, the villagers are guarded by veteran spearmen, which makes it difficult for those knights to push this. But, of course, Mista will try to use this raid as a diversion, and then push in the middle once again. What is that? Okay, that's the step readout. As some archers are being sent north, Mista will regroup and then hit that gold mine with both the archers and the knights. I think I saw Traction Trebuchet shelling that castle. Indeed, that's the case. You could technically justify trying to jump on it. It's wide open and defenseless. Spearmen heading to the north. And even just 3 or 4 knights from Mista could take down that Trebuchet. He still needs that forward castle there. And once again, he's in a good position, but he needs to be careful not to let this slip out of his grasp. Previous game, he was in a great position, and then one counterattack finishes him off. His castle is being shelled as we speak. Tower slowly being burned down by the castle fire. All the villagers nearby got killed though. Remember, the Springald Tower can reach them, which makes it difficult to repair that castle. You might need to snap down that trebuchet, even if you lose 10 knights or so for it, because the thing is that the tower is denying the villagers from repairing, and the trebuchet is slowly taking down the castle. You see, there's only 3 villagers left, and the knights will be pulled to burn down the tower instead. They're realizing that the tower is preventing the villagers from repairing. Once the tower is gone, you can potentially send in your villagers to repair the castle. Buy yourself some time to take down that trebuchet. Men-at-arms now charging into the wood line. They got 2 or 3 villager kills out there. Spearmen trying to repel the attack, but there is also archers from Mista. Army numbers are still rather close. But of course, Leenock is pinned inside his own base and he's having a hard time accessing resources. And now Mista is realizing that, okay, my opponent is playing 2 town centers. I might as well do the same thing. That's a forward siege workshop for Mista, going for potentially Springolds. He didn't finish the building though. And now he's sending some more villagers to repair the castle. He still needs a Springold to snap down that trebuchet. Keeps the castle alive for the time being, but there is, I think, a second trebuchet right now. Indeed, second trebuchet now shelling the castle. Mista can keep that castle up for some time. Here comes the knights, and indeed, one of those trebuchets were dangerously exposed here. One knight will be traded off for a trebuchet, but that's an acceptable battle, of course, for Mista. He will probably try to swoop in and snipe down the other treb. First time in the game, I do believe that we're seeing Leenock potentially sending a counterattack here. This could be a great move. Indeed, 4 Lancers coming over. And you gotta wonder if Deja Vu is going to be there. This is exactly how things started going bad for Mista in the previous game. He was focusing on a battle in the middle. Suddenly, 6 Lancers show up back at home, and he just lost so many villagers. The difference here is that Leenock is already in a very tough spot holding on to his base. And Mista has defensive town center already on that gold mine, so I think Mista should have no trouble reacting to this, although that's the same thing that I said in the previous game. This time around, Mista is paying a lot more attention. He's going to see those knights counterattacking, and he might even call off all his knights here, just so that he can guarantee to clean all those up. He's got 30 archers, 20 knights, 4 arbaletiers. The arbaletiers are back at home, of course. They will try to repel these knights, and I think there is an overchop here. Indeed, the knights will get onto the wood line, but with 5 or so arbaletiers, you should have no trouble stopping this one for the time being. You gotta be careful if you're Mista because you're running into a lot of spearmen, but the archers are now catching up. And those spearmen are quite heavily mispositioned. Looks like the knights and men-at-arms will just trade off here. Towers now being burned down from Leenock. Leenock still has access to all key resources, however. So, while that castle up in his face is to a certain extent scary, it is by no means something that's lethal to him right now. What could be lethal is a potential counterattack on his gold mine, especially if this is supported by so many archers. Archers setting up against the spearmen. But for the time being, you will have the spearmen being repelled. Mangonel numbers are increasing steadily for Leenock, and you gotta start respecting that if you're Mista. And I wonder what Mista is gonna do, because he's got stone for another castle. If he wants to go very aggressive, this is the spot. Try to deny that wood line, because now the lack of wood could start haunting Leenock. But that would be an ambitious castle to build, especially given the fact that the opponent has mangonels and spears. And you get the feel that Mista might have hit a roadblock, but he's banking up resources for Imperial. And the safest play here for Mista, indeed, is just to go Imperial, get some bombards out. His trebuchets would take too much time to take down buildings, but the moment he gets to Imperial, he could get some bombards, and those bombards can take down buildings really rapidly. Looks like the second castle will just be there to reinforce the first one. No relics picked up by either side, no sacred sites being taken, so it is all about the fight. In front of the base for Leenock. Once again, we're seeing some POV footage over here. For whatever reason, it is sometimes grainy for players, and I have no influence on this, of course. I'm just receiving a clean image from Berlin. I'm not exactly sure why that happens, but that's a thing that has been there for some time. Mista, indeed, is getting ready for Imperial, and the ultimate jackpot would be the Red Palace up front. The Red Palace is a very strong defensive landmark, in general very powerful castle-style landmark, and it's extremely difficult to take down because it has a lot of firepower. You need a lot of long-range siege to be able to deal with that, and you cannot really get close to it because otherwise you would just get wiped out. And there was the Red Palace. You could see for a brief moment that Mista was building it. Meanwhile, Leenock is planning to launch a counterattack on the north. He's just trying to completely evade the opponent's base or the opponent's forward. Here comes another town center down south. This is something that Mista will find. He's going to try and push that one, and the town center has taken a heavy beating already. Leenock is going to be forced to repair this one with villagers. For now, it seemed like for a brief moment Mista was going to disengage, and indeed that's exactly what he's doing. Now this is a little risky here for Mista, because if the Red Palace doesn't go up, he could be in trouble. But as you see, Leenock is launching a counterattack. Now, what Mista needs is a defensive castle back at home. Leenock has spotted the Red Palace. He knows he needs to fight this one no matter what. He's setting up the mangonels. The castle fire will help push this one back for the time being, though. That's the reason... Ooh, Khan getting picked off in the middle. The reason why this castle right next to the Red Pass is so powerful and so important for Mista is because it is helping protect those villagers. Yet, Mista's Imperial Age progress was halted for the time being, and he's gonna have to buy himself some time. Mangonel opens fire, however, the tower getting burned down by Leenock. Second Mangonel shot could come in here, and where did that come from? On the right side, you have some trebuchets taking down those forward buildings. Springolds will take down the Mangonel here from Mista. And we're looking at a potential disaster once again for Mista. He's canceling his Imperial Age. The landmark took a lot of damage, which means that he's losing a ton of resources on that. You see, he no longer can afford Imperial Age. Absolute disaster for Mista here. He tried to go up to Imperial and it worked out so well. It was so close. If he gets that Red Palace up, I think he might have had the game. But now, Leenock is going to deny this one, and Leenock is going full Castle Age. Army number is now 2-1. 60 army versus 37. The numbers are still steadily increasing over here for Mista, and he's trying to save that one last keep out there in the middle as it is being trapped down. I think it's already on fire. Archers are cleaning up the spears, and the arballetry are doing well against the men-at-arms. But Mista had to give up on that Imperial Age progress, and that could lose him the game. Because now, he's in Castle Age just like his opponent. His villager count is still looking better, but he was very close to potentially pushing that dagger deep enough to pop out Leenock from this game. Now Leenock is back on track, because he stopped his opponent's Imperial Age. And if the landmark gets cancelled without taking any damage, you get the full refund. If it starts taking damage, you get less and less refund, depending on how much damage it took. And that building took a lot of damage, so Mista probably got like a 50% refund at best. Mista now being overrun by spearmen. He has boiling oil on that castle, but you see there was not enough wood for him to repair, and now he's setting it on fire. Boiling oil once again coming out on the spears, but the castle gets taken down. And you see that Leenock is gaining more and more momentum. And are we going to see Mista once again getting taken down in a game that looked so good for him? Because I feel like if there is any person right now in this game with momentum, that's Leenock. Mista's going to protect that gold mine down south over here, as he's also expanding towards the berries. But he's nowhere close to Imperial, and that is getting more and more concerning, because if there is one player that's planning on going into Imperial, that could be Leenock. He's banking up some resources here, and with the food income he has, in just a minute, he can think about going up to Imp. And if he gets there, he's going to be in a great position. Let's not forget, Leenock won game number 1, and in that game, Mista had a huge lead. Now Leenock is potentially even leading in game number 2 here, because while his vulture count is still slightly weaker, he's still got the step redoubt, and what's more important is that he's got the map presence. He's got the mobility with the Lancers, he's starting to burn down towers all across the map. In the middle, you still have a force of Arbaletier and Crossbowmen out there for our blue player Mista, but the Mongols should be able to push them back for the time being. And now the question becomes, who's going to be able to raid the opponent? Because you have a counterattack coming in here by Mista. This will be spotted by Leenock. On the other side, you also have a counterattack from Leenock. Mista also spotted that. The question is, can these Lancers from Leenock hit one of the key deposits on the right side? These or these? Because that's the big question mark over there. Looks like Mista is going to be very successful with his own counterattack. He's going to deny the towers that were built right next to the step redoubt. Spearmen, however, thanks to the Yam network, they're catching up. And on the right side, there is no response from Mista. So while Leenock was able to respond to that Knight's counterattack quite swiftly with the Spearmen, there is no response right now from Mista. And keep in mind, every single building burned down over here by the Lancers will give a ton of resources for Leenock, especially if he has gotten the bounty upgrades, and he's the one going up to Imperial, I do believe, with the White Stupa. All the forces of Mista are being pulled to the right side to deal with those Lancers, but that opens up the possibility of pushing the left potentially with the Spearmen, and that's exactly what Leenock is thinking about. He could push the north, he could try to burn down some buildings, and that gives you a ton of bounty. Speaking of bounty, once you get to Imperial, you can think about the stone bounty upgrade, because if you get that upgrade, burning down every single building gives you a huge amount of stone to work with, and that helps so much when it comes to continuously maintaining that double production on your OVU. Imperial Age in for Leenock. 5 minutes ago, I wouldn't have thought that he's gonna be the player in Imperial over Mista, who is not an imp. Mista's got food in that guild hole that he could pull off. Now that we're getting deep into the game, though, you gotta wonder if he just forgot about that. Because early on, when you don't have a lot of farming eco, you set it on food and you're fine with it. But ultimately, you want to switch it up to gold, especially as the map starts running low on gold. And that's not something that Mista has done. And it's starting to haunt him as well. He has just pulled off the food, I believe, from it. But the gold is still there. He's lacking gold for Imperial. Now he's the one that should start thinking about pushing the opponent before the opponent gets the imp upgrades. But I feel like Mista's window could be closing here. Because his opponent is now an Imperial, so we could see Elite Spearmen, we could see Elite Lancers coming in. Potentially Hand Cannoneers, although it's unlikely against that many archers. Bombards could be a thing, of course. Long-range Springolds. So all those goodies coming from Imperial Age Advantage could be massive here. Looks like it is Elite Lancer, Elite Spearman, and some siege upgrades as well for Leenock that's coming in as his Imperial Age is now starting to kick in. Whereas on the other side for Mista is banking up resources for Imp, so there's a glimpse of hope for him that he can still catch up. But Leenock, if he starts adding army, he should be fine. But that's a big question mark. Look at the population and look at the army count. 85 right now for Mista in terms of military, 51 for his opponent. And Mista, while he could go into Imperial, he's still in Castle. On the other hand, though, you have Leenock with 88 villagers only, now starting to lose them under the town center. And what's more concerning for Leenock is his overall population. Only 135. He's got 51 army on paper, but that's very misleading because one thing that Leenock doesn't have is a lot of manpower. Most of that army for Leenock is actually Mangonels and Trebuchets. He had like 3 or 4 trebuchets, those are still alive, but as you see, there's basically no human power on the battlefield for him. Just a couple of spearmen chasing down those knights. On the north, Mista is fortifying that position, and you gotta wonder if Mista is going up to Imperial soon as well. As you see, most of that military power for Leenock is trebuchets and mangonels. While the trebuchets will be good against the buildings, of course, here, they won't really be helpful in a direct battle. And the rest of the army for Leenock is spears, which means that Mista sending in the men-at-arms could easily take a good fight over here. Can Mista win this one, staying in Castle Age? His population is looking a lot better than Leenock's one, and Leenock is slowly running out of resources inside his own base, so Leenock will have to start expanding. Still no relics for either of the players, still no sacred sites for either of the players. Mista right now is just sort of waiting for the opponent to charge in here, despite the fact that he's still in Castle and his opponent is in Imperial. In fact, Mista should cancel some of the production that he's doing right now and think about Imperial Age. Here comes the big charge. Most of that army, however, is spearmen, and the men-at-arms and the archers will be more than happy to take this fight. There's a couple of Mongols on the left side, and I do believe the cavalry is jumping on them. You see at the left side of the screen, Mongols getting picked off. Springolds were also quite effective against this one, and the army of Leenock is just disappearing from the battlefield. The Mongols weren't able to fight this one. The trebuchet is completely useless in this battle. And as the reinforcements trickle in here for Leenock, he's still struggling to maintain this position, being overrun by the archers, being overrun by the Springolds, now opening fire on the Mongol. The only Mongol on the battlefield for Leenock is now gone, and with that, the archers will just pick off all of those spearmen, and as the spearmen go down, the veteran lancers are now charging onto the battlefield. Leenock is spamming spearmen left and right. He knows very well that he needs to reinforce this position, but he's losing ground. Inch by inch, the forces of Mista are pushing forward. Most of the spearmen are now cleaned up, and as you see, the military population of Leenock disappeared. He's down to 5 villagers, or 5 army. He still has the villagers, but that's basically it. 79 villagers, 7 army only. Mista has this. There's no way that Leenock is gonna be able to protect any of his economy, because there is simply no army on the battlefield. And it looked so weird. One of the craziest games in the entire tournament here in the quarterfinals. Mista losing his Imperial Age progress pretty much. His opponent beating him to Imp, and then Mista just unleashing full Castle Age warfare here, and Leenock might have underestimated the numbers that Mista had. Leenock had a lot of army population, but most of that was siege, and ultimately it was one Mongol supporting a dozen of spearmen. The spearmen numbers were nice, but there was no siege to support them, and with just 1 or 2 Mongols on the battlefield, the Springolds of Mista had an easy time killing them, the Knights had an easy time killing them, and there was just no response to the men-at-arms of Mista, there was no response to the Mongol fire. There was no response to the Knights in the end because the spearmen got all picked off. And probably the thing that loses the game here for Leenock was that he didn't have Mongol support. More Mongol support to be precise for that army. Because if he had like 3 or 4 more Mongols, it would have been much more difficult for Mista to take good fights here. Now Leenock is just sitting back, he's trying to regroup, but it's going to be next to impossible. He's down to 86 population. He's still Imperial Age, and that's the reason why he's not tapping out, but he's losing villagers underneath the town center. And you know that Mista's position is good when he can afford to commit underneath the town center. He's coming in, picking off all the villagers, and Mista, once he gets up to Imperial Age, that's going to be game over. Improved roller shard triggers coming in for Leenock, so he's going to try and play this one in Imp. He's going to try and get some Springolds going. But I'm not even sure what he would accomplish with the Springolds here at this point. He could take down the opponent's Springolds, but that's it. He's got the elite Knights in there, and that's actually a good battle coming in for Leenock. Can he somehow muster some forces to fight this one? There are some arballetry on the battlefield. If they can focus down the Lancers, I don't think this army is going to be sufficient for Leenock. He's coming in with the push, but the numbers seem to be a lot better for Mista. Reinforcements are a lot more consistent, and this feels more like a one last desperate hurrah from Leenock to try and recover a game that for a moment seemed to be won by him, although, truth being told, it seemed to be a lost game for the majority of the game, and then the momentum switch. The momentum switch of him being able to deny that Imperial Age process, and suddenly he probably felt like he could win this game, and he could move on to 2-0. Mista still sitting on a ton of food, a very low amount of gold. Mista has no desire to go into Imperial, and I think that if he just goes into Imperial, Leenock would just tap out. Because he would know that he has no chance. As long as Mista is in Castle, Leenock is playing on because he knows that while his numbers are smaller, the quality of his army is much better. His numbers, however, are substantially smaller. 12 army as opposed to 46. Mista, I wonder if his guild hall is still set on food because he desperately needs gold over here. His food eco is fine. It's 2100 per minute. There is the forward castle for Mista. He wants to get that forward position established, and you see that it is now Leenock who's running out of resources. He's out of gold. He has absolutely no gold accessible, which means that he can't capitalize on those elite lancers. He can't even go for men-at-arms. He has to go for horsemen, but those forces, even though they're Imperial Age forces, they'll be beaten by the Castle Age French army. Mista, very long and grindy game over here. He had to work for this one, and he almost let this one slip out of his grasp once again. Game number 1, that just fell out of his control because he lost so many villagers, but finally, he's going to be able to finish this game, and you see the relief on his head, the relief on his face. That's the thing. He was able to finally finish this game here, but this looked so grim for a brief moment in the middle. He was leading the entire game, and then suddenly it was just a counterattack by Leenock. He denies the Imperial Age process of Mista, and I'm fairly certain Mista was like, oh shoot, here we go again. Because for a brief moment it really felt like Leenock was going to be able to do the exact same thing that was done in game number 1, get a sudden switch of momentum, and then finish off the game with a victory. In the end, Mista is able to take this win here, but as we are seeing, he has to be very cautious with his moves, because one bad move could lose him games. We're going into game number 3 with an even scoreline, 1-1 between Mista and Leenock. Welcome back to game number 3 of Mista versus Leenock. This is the quarterfinals of N4C, and we will have an Abbasid versus French matchup over here on what seems to be Lipany. Spawning on the left side is going to be Mista playing as the Abbasid dynasty in blue. And on the right side, it's a somewhat puzzling choice from Leenock. He's going with the French. Not exactly sure what to think about this one, because if I feel like there is any map where French could be a little dangerous to pick, it's going to be this one. Let's talk through that entire thought process. This map is very Abbasid and Delhi heavy. Of course, Delhi once again being banned, not really going to be a factor. But what is going to be a factor is the fact that this is a map with a ton of berries. Berries equals Abbasids and Delhi, and Abbasids have a great matchup against French. So you really gotta wonder what exactly the game plan is for the French player here. Now, this is one of those Lipany generations where you have a narrow choke point in between the players. The Lipany map can spawn basically 2 ways. It can spawn in a way that it's basically like Arabia, so you have the hills on the side and it really doesn't impact the battle in the middle. Or it can spawn in a way that you basically have a narrow passage between yourself and your opponent, and on the sides you basically have ridges that will prevent crossing. Now, these ridges still have some openings on them, but these are volable, these are defendable, and these are less likely to be utilized. So the key factor here is going to be the battle in the middle, and that entire area is covered by a stealth forest. So having vision on that area is going to be immensely valuable, because you could be in for some nasty surprises if you don't have an insight into that stealth forest. House of Wisdom now complete for Mista. He is going for the sheep at the beginning. That's something that you can do with the Abbasids, of course, and only later shift to the berries. He's going to drop berries at some point. Of course, he's going for Lumber Camp first. And let's talk about the berry spots here for Mista, because that's a source of concern. If you look at the berry spots, you have one over here that's quite exposed at the front, 2 more on the right side, very exposed, and the 4th one he has is on the far right as well. Each player has 4 patches of berries, or at least, while some of them are pretty much on neutral ground and don't belong to any player, technically speaking, there is 8 patches of berries. 4 should be closer to one player, 4 should be closer to the other. So technically, Mista has 4 patches of berries to work with, but all 4 of those are absolutely horrendous. There is no backup berries over here, there's no backup berries over here. They're all on the same side, in this right-hand side area, and they're all on the front. And that's the concern that you have here. Because oftentimes what you see the Delhi player do is that even if they get one of those berry patches denied, they will just go to a different patch of berries as a backup. But basically there is no reasonable backups here for Mista should he lose access to that side and the berries. Barracks now being dropped by Mista, so he's preemptively... He's preemptively preparing for a potential cavalry push, and that's always a possibility. And we'll have to see if Leenock is going for a cavalry push, actually, because he has dropped the mill. Now, he doesn't have a ton of sheep underneath the town center, so you could justify just dropping the mill so that he can touch the berries. But I would think that a professional scout's build into fast castle is not impossible. That's something that we sometimes see the French players do against the Abbasid 2 town center play, because I assume that the Abbasid 2 town center play is what Leenock is anticipating here. But here's the catch. There is no second town center for Mista, and I don't see him moving out towards stone, the stone being heavily exposed on the front as well. I'm not sure if this was the game plan the whole time for Mista, so he just wanted to sort of surprise the opponent to a certain extent, going for a non-2 town center build for the Abbasids, or he just reacted to how the map looks like. Because this map that Mista has is not suitable for a 2 town center build. So this might be a reaction to the map, or it could also be just the fact that he wants to surprise the opponent, because as I said, throughout this tournament, we have seen that the meta with the Abbasids is a 2 town center play. He's sending forward one spearman, that's going to harass those gold miners, but it really doesn't inflict a ton of damage here. His own gold miners also being harassed by the scout of the opponent. Looks like we'll have a stable coming up here for Mista. The unit composition of spearmen and horsemen is very dangerous to the French, and you get the feel that Leenock wasn't really expecting such a level of pressure coming at him at the beginning. He has an archer range right now, and he has a vision on the opponent's base. So he knows very well that Mista is likely going for a stable with horsemen as well, but you get the feel that Leenock was caught a little off guard by this aggression. He probably expected the opponent to play 2 town centers, and that's the standard way of playing the Abbasids here. So him seeing Spearman coming in directly when he hits Feudal Age is definitely a surprise, and he's gonna have to react to this. Now, he's dropping a barracks himself, which is a good way to just match whatever the opponent has. Go for his own cavalry plus Spearman composition, just to be able to match the opponent's unit composition. And ultimately, he's the French player, he's the defender, so he should be able to take reasonable fights and repel any aggression. And the question is whether or not Mista is going to have a delayed second town center, because that's always an option. If he feels like he can't really break the defense of the opponent, or he can't inflict any damage, he can still choose to go for a second town center here. We'll have to see if that's going to be the case. For now, it looks like it is just Spearman, however. He's got some horsemen out, but now he's switching to a much more defensive approach, and this is something that Leenock also has to respect. For now, Leenock is playing this one patiently. He is sitting back at home, he's waiting for his opponent to strike. But this is buying a lot of time for Mista, and as long as he's only using one villager, or one town center, to produce villagers, he's barely consuming food, if you think about that. The fresh foodstuffs upgrade is making the villagers so cheap that using it on only one town center basically means that you have a ton of food to use on either army production, talk about spearmen, talk about horsemen, or potentially just bank it up and think about castle age even. That would be a cheeky play. Is that a camel archer queued up? That's a camel archer, I believe. And that would be an interesting addition here. Mista has seen the barracks, so he knows that there is going to be a couple of spearmen, and the Abbasids have a great response to that, that being the camel archer. And now, I think he's pulling away the archers intentionally. You can see his POV. You can see what he's doing with his line of sight. He knows that the archers are there, he's trying to pull them towards the left, and then hit the gold mine with the spearmen. He has found himself a very nice hilltop position, by the way. That hilltop position with the scout will give him a lot of line of sight, and he's still taking a look at the opponent's base. Archers still back at home here for Leenock, so he's not going to let that gold mine go. But behind this one, Mista is going to be discovered. Leenock now knows that there is a push coming his way. He's got some archers, he's got some spearmen, but you gotta wonder if the numbers are sufficient here for Leenock, especially if Mista comes in with a couple more horsemen. Leenock doesn't have a ton of resources in the bank as he's dropping a second barracks. You could see that for a brief moment. Whereas for Mista, he's ready to strike. The target is obvious, he wants to hit that gold mine. Now he has a camel archer as well. That's going to debuff those knights, and that's going to make it even more difficult for Leenock to engage this. And of course the camel archer will do very effectively against the spears. That's only one camel archer, however, and it looks like we're going to see the villagers of Mista moving out. That could be for the stone. And Leenock kept the scout over there, so he wants to know if the opponent is going for that stone mine. It could also be for the berries. I think they're going for the berries. So Mista will just play full 1,000 over here. They'll actually take down the scout here. That's painful for Leenock. As I said, line of sight and just the pure fact that you have or you do not have vision on this map could be quite important as a factor. We do have a bit of a proxy, indeed, berry gathering operation over here for Leenock, and that's a sign that he's gonna struggle to access food himself, because he has to walk all the way out there for food. Here comes the horseman, and it looks like this is not something that Mista was ready for. It is one villager taken down. Now the spearmen hiding in the stealth forest. They're waiting for the knights to pile up. And now you're going to see a bit of a loop around here from the spearmen. They're jumping on the knights as we speak. The spearmen of Leenock do brace for impact. Camel Archer helping out a lot here. Archer numbers are looking healthy for Leenock. He's got some horsemen to fight against. But it looks like Mista doesn't have the army here. I don't think Mista has this. In fact, it's a quite bad battle for Mista. He's losing all the spearmen. He still has some horsemen to deal with, but in the end, oh, actually, there is more. There's a lot more coming in from Mista, so I may have underestimated his capabilities of reinforcing this battle, because you're seeing more and more horsemen appear on the battlefield. The camel archers could pick off the spears, but it looks like the spearman archer composition of Leenock is still standing strong, and ultimately, Mista gets forced back. Now, do keep in mind that behind this one, the villager count is still pretty much even, but now Mista is on the defense, and he's gonna need to get some more horsemen on the battlefield. Mista is lacking all the blacksmith upgrades. His opponent has melee defense and melee attack as well, but no ranged attack or defense for those archers. Still, Mista doesn't have the blacksmith upgrades at all, so that's definitely something that's helping Leenock win battles like this. Numbers steadily increasing here for Mista, and he's ready to once again launch a counterattack. I think Leenock is realizing that he's being lured into a trap, and he's just falling back for the time being. One thing that Mista is able to accomplish with this is access all those berries, and that's definitely something that's very helpful for a player that's, by default, not supposed to be able to access those berries against an aggressive civilization like the French. Now, you could see for a brief moment that Mista is dropping a mining camp on the stone, which means that he's realizing that he can't really break this stalemate, and he might need to go for a second town center. This is something that, as I said, is a possibility for him. If he is realizing that this is sort of turning into a stalemate, might as well just go a little more defensive and start with a second town center, so he's going to be able to build up an eco lead over the opponent. Currently, it's 39 villagers over 39, but Leenock has a lot of eco upgrades. He's got lumberjacking, he's got the wheelbarrow upgrade as well, and he's just now grabbing horticulture. Archers are swooping in. First villager goes down from Mista, second one goes down. Third one will be picked off. That's the first time that Leenock is killing villagers from the opponent, and he's doing that in a quite effective fashion. That's going to be 3 villagers down from Mista. And I do see some red units hitting those berries at the south as well. I wonder if that's a knight or not. Because if that's a knight, Mista could lose villagers, and boy oh boy, it's 33 villagers over 41. That villager count was even just a minute ago. So there had to be other villager casualties elsewhere as well. Now the lumberjacks are going to get pushed by the archers. No villager getting picked off over there. I really wonder what happened to those berries at the south. Mista's still staying calm, but he lost a lot of villagers, and I wonder if he even spotted that. Horsemen will try to meet those knights on the battlefield. Those knights are coming from the south. I'm fairly certain that they killed the villagers. I'm like 95% sure that they did. Right here. And that would be a disaster for Mista, because that's a significant portion of his food eco. Now, he's here to retaliate. He's coming in with the horsemen, hitting those hunters. Reaction from Leenock is sending in a couple of spears. Only 2 spearmen out there with the hardened upgrade, but in the front of Mista's base. Here we go. Big battle unfolding. Forward tower on the way for Leenock. Numbers advantage on the side of Mista, however, and it looks like he's gonna be able to take this army down. Now the horsemen are coming from the other direction. Perfect sandwich surrounding all those archers. Beautiful move to surround the archers, and suddenly Leenock is on the run. His entire army is getting surrounded by the horsemen. Now the camel archer numbers are good enough to deal with the spears. 4 retreat by Leenock, and Mista was using those retreating horsemen perfectly. Got a beautiful surround on all of those archers. And in the end, most of the archers are now gone from the battlefield, and as much as Mista had trouble accessing food, Leenock had those problems as well. He had to move out for that hunt, and that's now no longer accessible. He's going to be forced to start adding some farms. He's still ahead by 8 villagers, but he's gonna be pinned inside his own base for a long time, forced to add farms, whereas Mista is still going to be able to access those berries all across the map. Villagers sneaking out in the north. This is not something that Mista has seen just yet, but he might be able to intercept them. If he gets lucky over here, he's going to find them. Looks like Leenock has seen the enemy horsemen coming in, so he's just going to hide for the time being. But I wonder if he's running into the camel archers. Oh, a disaster. He tried to avoid the horsemen, but he runs into the camel archers. He's very lucky that he's making it back home. Now a bit of a counterattack in the middle by the knights, but army numbers looking a lot healthier for Mista, and he's gonna have the spearmen in the middle to fight this one. Indeed, he's bracing for the impact. He's got a camel there to debuff the cavalry as well. And now it is full feudal warfare. And the problem for Leenock is that he's running out of gold. In fact, he's got no consistent gold income. And when it comes to backup gold mines, he has one here, and one here. Now this one up front, that's the one that he's depleting right now. So the two backup gold mines that he has on the right and the left, those are the ones accessible. But neither of those are easy to control. And that's a concern for him. He's swinging around with some forces. I presume those are knights or horsemen all the way around here. And he could actually find a way to hit the berries from this side. It could also just be hunters, to be honest. It's a little difficult to tell from the red dots, but they do pass the hunt. So I think those are knights hitting the berries or planning to hit the berries of Mista. Looks like a tower is being dropped on the gold mine here for Leenock, but one thing that he did not expect is an army coming over from the shadows, and it looks like he suddenly has to take a battle over here. Looks like he's going to retreat for a time being, abandon the gold mine, losing the tower in the process. That's going to hurt so much because once again, he's struggling to access gold, and French without gold is a quite underwhelming civilization, if I may say so. Finally, those red units are back, and they're hitting the eco of Mista. He's losing villagers. Those are definitely knights killing his villagers, and this is not the first time that he's losing villagers to knights. So I wonder how significant of a damage they will do. Most of those are heavily damaged. It looks like there seems to be some spearmen to deal with them, but they're still alive, and they're still in the eco of Mista. So Mista's gonna need at least 1 or 2 more spearmen to deal with them. For now, it's 45 villagers against 53, so slight advantage for Leenock. But the big thing here is that Mista, of course, barely spending food on villagers, much higher what am I trying to say here? Much higher efficiency, probably. That's probably the best way to say this one. Low cost for those villagers is really helping for Mista here. And with that, he's getting ready for Castle Age. The knights are still within his eco, but Castle Age is going to come in much faster for him than his opponent. And the thing is that the main reason why that happens is because Leenock has no gold, and it looks like now the villagers will be killed on the right side. There's nowhere to go for them. Absolutely nowhere to go for those villagers. You gotta wonder why Mista even came to this direction. I'm a little puzzled, but I'm suspecting that he's looking for the berries. Keep in mind, Mista knows very well that his opponent will need to get food from somewhere. He has scouted a certain portion of the map, knows that there is no berries over there, so he will look elsewhere for berries. And I do believe that he just sort of blindly sent in the army to the right side, looking for berries, looking for villagers to kill, and he was successful finding quite a few over there. The knights inside the base of Mista are still alive, and that's something that he'll have to address. Camel archers are now being sent back, and the knights are being pursued by horsemen, so this is going to be a cleanup. And Castle Age is coming in. I do believe Mista will be going up with the culture wing. Leenock is not far away, and he's got a scary army, though. That's something that Mista is going to have to respect. It's quite a lot of spears, quite a lot of knights out there. And the thing is that even if Mista gets to Castle Age, he's going to have to switch into men-at-arms, because his opponent is mostly playing with spearmen, archers, and knights, so the best unit to add here would probably be men-at-arms. On the right side, archers are once again opening up against the villagers. There was a spearman harassing the gold miners, so you see that every once in a while, Mista is getting a couple of units on those key resource deposits, and he's trying to probe them, see if there is any enemies nearby, because if there are, he could easily get 1 or 2 villager kills, and that's exactly what he's doing over and over and again. It's the military wing. Hello there, not something that you see every day, but Mista is definitely one of the more out-of-the-box thinkers of Age of Empires 4. He's unleashing the spearmen on the enemy, and that's going to be at least 4 or 5 villagers getting killed here. I don't think that the villagers do have textiles. Counterattack being launched right now by Leenock. He's realizing that his opponent is Castle Age, so it's now or never. Phalanx upgrade just now coming in for the spears. There's a tower with arrow slits on it to try and hold off these forces. Some of the units garrisoned inside might be villagers that might just be taken down. Phalanx almost in. You could see veteran spearman in a second. Indeed, that's going to be quite a few villagers taken down from Mista in that tower. He was able to compensate by taking down some of the forces of the opponent at the gold mine. First mangonel now set up though, and Leenock has no direct answer to those mangonels. Mangonel opening up against the archers. It will miss the first shot. It actually catches some of the knights off guard. So some of the knights getting heavily damaged. But what is bigger is that the knights are getting absolutely rampaged by the spears. As a retaliation, Leenock was able to get the gold miners harassed. His own gold mine is now getting pushed, and every single part of the map is just full of action. Villagers running left and right, really, because both sides are losing their ecos. Leenock is losing his entire gold mining operation. His opponent is losing his gold mining operation. The berry villagers had to be evacuated. And now you're seeing spearman versus spearman supported by archers. Players aren't able to take good fights over here because they just have to look at 5 different places to avoid losing a substantial amount of villagers. And I think in the end, Leenock actually gets the better of this one because he's still ahead by 10 villagers. And he was able to clean up the counterattack inside his base. Mista down to 78 food per minute. That's a big problem. So it looks like his entire food eco, that being just berry villagers, was pushed. And now you're seeing a new army once again coming in on the south. Mangonel opened up against it. Guildhall on the way for our flank player. 4 Castle Age man-at-arms are now being mixed in. Spearmen jumping on the Mangonels. Beautiful archers kill. Beautiful kill from the Mangonel on the archers. And with that, all the archers are just done. Leenock has basically no archers left on the battlefield, so the spearmen that are the currently veterans and the camel archers should be able to deal with those. That was a beautiful mangonel hit. It's possible that Leenock wasn't even looking, simply because if you think about it, there is so many things to address. While villagers lead right now for Leenock, and while Mista started mining some stone at the beginning, he decided not to go for a second TC in the end, so he won't be able to come back in terms of villager count for the time being. Knights are once again rampaging his eco, and lack of mobility is going to start haunting Mista here, even though he's gonna be able to stun one of those knights and damage it very heavily. He's now making siege weapons on the battlefield. He needs to launch a direct push before his opponent can start raiding him. That's the key thing here with the Abbasids. If you are the one attacking the opponent, Leenock can't really afford to launch wave after wave of cavalry into your base, because he needs to defend. One camel archer being sent over to harass the gold miners. You know how the drill goes. The same way that you would use a Khan to harass those gold miners, you can use a camel archer to do that. That's actually a low HP camel archer as well, so its impact on battles would be somewhat minimal, but it would be a great unit to just harass those gold miners. Say goodbye to the camel archer though, the knights will take it down. But here comes the counterattack, and once again, Leenock's access to gold could easily be cut off on the right side. Spearmen are trickled in onto that farming eco. And you see Leenock is going back to that farm every once in a while, only to be pushed back into his base. Now 2 mangonels are setting up. 21 army versus 50, and that's the source of concern right now for Leenock. His army is much smaller than the opponent's one, and he has no answer to those mangonels just yet. Mangonels could set up and start taking down farms, and that would hurt the food eco of Leenock quite a bit. Indeed, that's exactly what they're doing. But there's the man-at-arms switch, and this is not something that Mista was expecting, I do believe. Those man-at-arms could jump on the mangonels. They're trying to get a good surround. Mangonels being called off. Camel archers trying to slow them down as much as possible. Mangonels setting up to open fire. They do get a nice volley on top of those man-at-arms. Some man-at-arms being mixed in as well by Mista. First couple of torches being thrown will mean that one mangonel could be taken down. Mangonel gets taken down by the first group of infantry, second mangonel also getting taken down from Mista, and now it is going to be just pure men-at-arms versus spearmen. That's a great fight over there for Leenock, and while he's distracting his opponent, he's also killing some villagers, but the numbers advantage is so big here for Mista, and Leenock doesn't have the numbers to fight this one. He's going to tap out, and ultimately, it's not even the type of the unit, it's going to be just the numbers of the units. Mista with the spearmen tanking up the push of the men-at-arms, and then using the camel archers as a high damage output unit, he's going to be able to take down Leenock's forces. And for the first time in this set, and I do believe for the first time in all of their matchups in N4C, including the Day 1 Swiss stage matchup, Mista is leading against Leenock 2-1. It is time for game number 4 between Mista and Leenock. Mista, one game up against Leenock, the winner of this quarterfinals, of course, gets into the semifinals, as we will have on the left side. Spawning in the red colors is Leenock playing as the English, and on the right side it is going to be Mongols for Mista in blue. It is King of the Hill, a map where Mista is extremely good with Mongols, and I get the feel that this could be a very difficult nut to crack for Leenock, because, as I said in one of the previous games that I casted for this particular set, Mista, in the recent 1 or 2 days, he started using French on this map. That's the meta civilization pick. And ever since he was doing that, I was wondering if that's to a certain extent a decoy. The reason why I didn't think it was a decoy is because when he started using the French, it wasn't set in stone that he gets into the top 6. So it was an interesting sort of mind game, and I was really wondering what's going to happen if he picks King of the Hill over here. Because I had a feel that he could actually go for Mongols, because based on what I've seen from him in the qualifiers, based on what I've seen from him in the first 1 or 2 days of the main event, he really loves the Mongols best for this map. But it was a civilization that he didn't really use in the last 1 or 2 days over here, so it will be interesting to see what his game plan is. But this is going to be a tough one for the English. Leenock quite successful gathering sheep here. He went for a second scout, which is not something that you always do with the English, especially if you want to go heavy on the farming eco. The sign that we are seeing double scouts being added, and thereby trying to increase the amount of sheep that you gather in Dark Age, makes me feel like Leenock wants to go very aggressive here. Because there are 2 ways that you can play English, and one of those were basically pioneered by Mista, excuse me. One of them is the more defensive, farm-focused approach. This is something that Mista loves to use, and he still has his English available, so we could see that build order in the upcoming games. The other approach is just to go very aggressive with that longbow push, and we have seen that over and over again. That's the traditional, good, old-school English build. And the fact that you're focusing so much on gathering sheep makes me wonder that you're going aggressive. Now, looking at the base of Mista, he's going to have a pasture rather close to the town center, and that's a perfect pasture. That's actually in the influence radius of the Ovu, yet very close to the town center, so it's a great spot for a pasture to be in. He's going to have to drop a gur on the gold mine, as on the other side, Leenock is going up with the council hall. Now, one of the factors that you will have to look at on this map is that the English have very wood-heavy unit composition at the beginning. They go for a lot of longbows, which means that they are depleting their wood stockpiles quite rapidly. And on this map, your starting wood is quite heavily limited. So Leenock is going to have to start expanding towards one of those neutral wood lines out here. Either this one on the north, or this one on the south. Which means that this gives an opportunity for Mista to potentially go for some raids if the game goes longer. Now, Mista himself is going for a rather slow-paced start here, no aggression coming in from him. He's being harassed a tiny bit by a scout, and it looks like that is going to delay his feudal age here by a couple of seconds. Early villager coming in, that's a very early villager from Leenock, so he wants to drop a tower even before his first longbows arrive. It's a little risky, but I love the idea. The thing here is that part of the reason why those 2 scouts pay off is because this basically guarantees that your villager is going to be a little safer. Especially against the Khan here, the scout is just going to push the Khan back. There is going to be a stable. This is scouted by Leenock, so Leenock is going to have to preemptively go for a barracks here. But the key thing is that Leenock is trying to make sure that he's getting a tower up in front of the enemy base, even before the first longbows arrive. So this way, he's going to have a very strong foothold. Looks like it's a forward barracks even. Now, this is a bit of a question mark for positioning, because while it's a forward barracks, the thing that's a little alarming here for Leenock is that it's sort of not in between the players. Now, of course, you could say, oh yeah, it's going to be great to stage an assault from the south. The thing that's a little concerning is that if there's a lot of battle going on in the middle between the 2 players, because Mista is going to send his army to the middle from his base to try and hit the opponent, and then Leenock is going to send his army over there as well, this barracks will take a lot of time to reinforce such a battle as in the middle. So, it will be interesting to see how effective this barracks becomes, actually. Khan will try to intercept some longbows. Even if it's just a couple of arrows, it's going to do some damage on the longbows, and every little bit helps. So, Mista, he's going to start picking off those longbows. No surprise over there. What's going to be more important is that he's going to spot the barracks. So now he knows that there is spearmen coming towards him. Looks like his gur is going to have to be moved from the gold mine, which means that we are going to close the door for a fast castle build. And Leenock is probably going to encounter a lot of horseman-archer combination over here for Mista. I would think that Mista is going to have to play full feudal here, but that's a good matchup for the Mongols. Double-trained archer horseman is something that's going to be difficult for the English to fight against, and it looks like we're going to have a super aggressive push here by Leenock. He's going to drop that tower right next to the Ovu, right in the face of the opponent, really. For now, there is no response to the Spearman, and that's getting alarming for Mista, because one thing to consider is that those spears can start burning down the Ovu. Defensive tower was attempted here by Mista, but that was going to be cancelled with the longbows picking off the villager, and as things stand, Mista seems to struggle to answer this one. He probably wasn't expecting a forward barracks there, and the thing is that those barracks now allow Leenock to reinforce that battle very easily. So, as I said, it depends on where the battle is taking place. As long as Leenock is the aggressor, that barracks is great. The moment Mista becomes the aggressor, it's going to be quite horrible to use. Double ranges coming in for Mista. It's going to be just archer production, but those are not in the influence radius of the Ovu. In fact, the Ovu is at the risk of being burnt down. So there won't be any double training for Mista, which will make it... Ooh. Wait a minute. I was just about to say that it's going to make it very ineffective, because obviously you don't want to just single train the archers. Here's the deal. Leenock saw the Ovu disappear before he destroyed it. This is a very important factor. If Leenock was looking here, he should know that his opponent plays the Ovu elsewhere. What I'm unsure about is whether Leenock actually looked at this screen. If Leenock looked at that screen and said, hey, the Ovu disappeared at like 40% HP, that's a sign that your opponent plays it elsewhere, because you can only have one Ovu running at the time. So, if the opponent places the Ovu elsewhere, the Ovu will disappear. Forward villager getting picked off over here by the horseman. Nice little move from Mista, preventing additional forward buildings from being constructed. So the question is, did Leenock see that Ovu disappear? Or does he just think it was destroyed? If he thinks it was destroyed, he could be in for a nasty surprise, because the archer numbers are increasing quite rapidly for Mista, and with the Yam network also boosting those archers, suddenly they can jump on the spearman, and indeed, now this is a very troublesome spot for Leenock to be in. Keep in mind that the archers also outrun the longbow, so they can pursue over here, and most of this army is just spearmen that have no answers to those archers. Longbow numbers rapidly increasing for Leenock, and now the position of that barracks is problematic. Because now the reinforcements are being cut off. You can't just make spearmen over here and then send them in to regroup here. You would have to send them all the way around to regroup, and as long as Mista is maintaining this position in the middle of the map, sort of around that sacred site, he's going to be able to split the opponent's forces into half, split the spearmen from the longbowmen, and if he just keeps adding horsemen himself, those longbows will be without spearman support, or at least they won't have a ton of spearman support to work with. So this is a great position for Mista to be in. In fact, he knows that there is blood in the water. He knows very well that this is the time to strike, and he's pulling up the deer stones. I need to remind you that if Mista wins this one, he would move on to a match point position, and he's in a great shape right now. He's pushing back the enemy into his base. With the deer stones affecting those archers even further, he can even pursue those longbows. And despite the fact that you have the long range for the enemy longbows, they won't be able to use that range advantage because, of course, those Mongol archers can just close the distance so fast. Leenock expanding to the south over here for wood lines. This is something that Mista is aware of as well. That's something that we have to consider. Mista knows fully well that his opponent will have to expand towards additional wood lines, so he might probe those every once in a while with some horsemen. You could also see that Leenock wants to see what his opponent is up to. I think he's just now realizing that his opponent has a new Ovu. Because I don't think that Leenock realized that his opponent was working with an Ovu here. I think he thought that the Ovu was destroyed and it was never rebuilt. And he's just now realizing that his opponent has an Ovu to work with, and that Ovu on that hilltop on a large stone mine, that's going to be very effective for a long time. Archer is now looping around. Mista has the right idea. He wants to hit the wood line on the north. The only problem for him is that the wood line on the south is going to be utilized by his opponent. But you see, the same way that he's heading this way, trying to probe that wood line, he could do the same thing on the south, and he would be very successful finding villagers. For now, he's sneaking around, looking for some more villagers. Sneaky, sneaky. He sees the farming eco. He could think about jumping on this. Archers are being sent to the south. So indeed, He had the right idea. He's looking for those lumberjacks. He knows very well that those have to be somewhere. He wasn't able to find them just yet because it looks like the walls will be completed in time for Leenock. Villagers being pulled forward. I think those are just going for the berries for the time being for Mista. He's got some gold to work with too. And he's grabbing... Is that wheelbarrow that we are seeing being grabbed? Yeah, there's wheelbarrow coming in for Leenock. Meanwhile, for Mista, he was prioritizing blacksmith upgrades. He's got ranged attack and ranged defense. Once again, those deer stones are being pulled a little closer. And we're getting to a stage where, especially if Mista is able to start hitting those houses on the northern side of Leenock's base, that could be concerning for Leenock, because he could easily get some of his houses burned down, thereby giving bounty for Mista, and of course losing his own population space. And now with the deer stones boosting the movement speed of those archers, look at that. They're coming in, and now they're pursuing those longbows. They know fully well that they can win this fight, and they do have the movement speed to pursue. They're focusing down the spearmen first, because they want to open up the possibility of more horsemen joining the fun. And Mista is also realizing that his opponent's gold mine is dangerously exposed over here. This is the position that he wants to be in, and he could also cut off the newly built longbows from the enemy. A newly built longbowman would easily be picked off by these archers here. Looks like the numbers are looking slightly better for Leenock, so this is going to force Mista back for the time being. But Mista realizes that, okay, I no longer need to commit a lot of resources into this army. Mista is thinking about Castle Age here, potentially. He's still making some long archers, and he's still making some horsemen, as Leenock is trying to get some walls going. But ultimately, I think now Mista can start thinking about Castle Age here. Archers will pick up the villagers sent to build the walls, and now the horsemen once again join the fun. They do have the extra range defense, so it's going to be difficult, very difficult in fact, for Leenock to pick them off. One spearman goes down. The second spearman will stay alive for the time being. Next volley, still not finishing it off. Still not finishing it off. And now you get all of those archers rampaging all the spearmen. And suddenly, I think that Mista may have seen the lumberjacking operation. He's going for the gold miners, but he should abandon those. He should just head straight south, and he could find all those lumberjacks. That's the jackpot for him. He's reinforcing his army here still with more archers, trying to split up his forces. And I think he's just now realizing lumberjacking. He has to know. He has to know that lumberjacks are over there. Horsemen once again being dispatched to try and fight off the longbows. Leenock is sending in the villagers to fight as well, but that's never a good sign when your villagers are fighting, even with the English. And Mista knows that. Mista knows that he could just focus down the villagers, get some more eco damage done on the opponent. Castle Age is on the way for Mista. He is a really good player with Mongols on King of the Hill. Might be the most lethal combination of a player, a civilization, and a map. And so far, he has been imposing his will on the opponent. Horseman switch coming in from Leenock, but you gotta wonder if it's coming a little too late, because by the time it's going to have an effect on the battle, you're going to see Mista getting up to Castle Age, double stables, double barracks. It's gonna be a combination of men-at-arms and lancers. Mista doesn't have a ton of stone to work with, so he's not gonna have a lot of double training, but in exchange he will pick off that villager once again, making the walls. And with that, the walls are still open, a new Khan was built, so that could also be sent over to do some harassment. And you also have to consider something. At some point, Leenock's villagers here at the south will overchop that wood line. So the opportunity for Mista will once again be open to try and get some harassment done. Mista is up to Castle Age. Leenock has some resources that he could use to think about Castle Age here. He's floating a lot of wood. 500 food, 500 gold, 700 wood in the bank, and it looks like now Leenock is realizing, oh shoot, I need to push this one before my opponent gets the Castle Age army in here. But of course the yam speed is going to help a lot for those archers to retreat, and you just want to buy yourself time until the first couple of men-at-arms, the first couple of lancers come in. Lancers will also help a lot, of course, because there is no spearman right now for Leenock, and indeed, the first men-at-arms, the first lancers are just now hitting the field here. Defense arrow will be popped by Mista. He's going to use his own horsemen against the longbows. At this point, however, Mista can afford to lose those archers, and he will just lose those archers for the sake of being able to clean up all this army here from Leenock. I don't see Leenock being able to keep this army alive, and now with those horsemen and lancers affected by the yam speed, all of those longbows will be pushed back into Leenock's base, if they even survive, because I don't think that they will survive this encounter. Leenock is still trying to get some more horsemen on the battlefield to try and slow this down. If he can get the walls up, he can buffer up and potentially buy himself some time to get to castle. That's his saving grace here. He basically sacrificed his army to try and get the walls up, but he's going to tap out. He's probably realizing that his army is gone. And Mista, that happiness on the face. The happiness on the face for Mista over here. He is up 3-1 against Leenock, and suddenly he's moving to match point. What a game. What a game. Really, as I said, Mista, King of the Hill, and Mongols is the most lethal combination of civilization, player, and map. And once again, the importance of him reacting to that aggression and just replacing the Ovu was immensely valuable. Leenock's approach was great. At the beginning, he definitely surprised Mista, but then Mista's reaction was so swift. And this was so far the best game that Mista has played. Every single decision he made was great. Every single reaction, every single move worked out well for him. Leenock played a good game, but Mista just outclassed him in this one. And with that, now Mista moves on to match point. And as I said, one of the concerning things here for Leenock is going to be that Mista still has his own English available. And Mista is really good with the English, with the farming eco. So there are still some concerns here for Leenock. We'll have to see what he does in game number 5. But match point for Mista. Mista could get it into the semifinals if he wins the upcoming game. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Mista versus Leenock, game number 5 coming up. Mista, match point with a 3-1 lead over Leenock as he's going to be playing as the English in blue. And on the other side, we'll have Abbasids for Leenock in red. As I mentioned before, if there are two civilizations that Mista is particularly dangerous with, it is the Mongols, especially on King of the Hill, but in general, and the English. The map is going to be Altai, spawning on the right side is going to be Mista in blue, and on the left side, you will have Leenock playing as the red Abbasids. A civilization matchup that could be troublesome here for Leenock. Not necessarily because the Abbasids are bad on this map, it's because they're solid. However, Mista's English is so flexible. This is the thing that's impressing me most about his gameplay with the English. He's probably the most flexible English player of all. If you compare it to some other players are reliant too much on a single strategy. Talk about very heavy eco focus with farms, or mass longbows with forward towers, and there is just limited amount of flexibility with them. Whereas for Mista, he just seems so fluid with the English. He's really the person that loves to add English knights, for example, not something that you see from many players. Now, of course, the Abbasids are a strong civilization, and that's going to be a little difficult to crack here, especially if Leenock has a good defensive position and he can go for 2 town centers. But that's where the weakness of the Abbasids could show. In order to go to second town center, you will need to get 2 things, stone and wood. Once we have the entire map vision, we will be able to see where the stone mines are for Leenock. He's got 1 good stone mine to work with. The concerning thing is going to be wood for him if you think about that, because wood is going to be needed as well for a second TC, and if Mista just goes for a couple of longbows, he could easily harass the opponent, force him to make a stable, potentially add 1 or 2 horsemen to deal with that. That already delays a second town center play, so I'm wondering how aggressive Mista is going to play, because as I said, the thing that's very good for him and the thing that most impresses me in his English gameplay is his fluidity and his flexibility with the civilization. So he's going to be able to adapt whatever is coming his way. As you see, Leenock is going to have that woodland quite far away from the town center on the right. That's a little more safe, I would say, than the one on the front, because though it's further away from the town center, it's a little less exposed to aggression coming from the front. But that stone mine that he's sending out villagers to, oh yeah, he changed his target. You could see for a brief moment that he went for this stone mine first, and then suddenly he shifted to the other side when he noticed that there is another stone mine. And that's the better stone mine, the one on the south, because obviously that's a lot further away from the English player. Now, he's being very active with his scout, he's seeing what his opponent is up to, sees the council hall, but there is no surprise as he's going to start building a chain of houses to incorporate the lumber camp into the influence radius of the Palazzo. Currently, for buildings towards the golden age for Leenock's House of Wisdom, he's going to have the 5th one with that house up, and of course he wants to connect that lumber camp. So the reason why you're sort of building a chain of houses is so that, first of all, that chain, all the houses will be incorporated in the influence radius of the House of Wisdom, and of course you want to incorporate that lumber camp as well, because the golden age will give you a quite decent amount of boost. It's not a huge boost, but it's a nice little start for your economy. It's a little bit of an extra getter rate, and as you go deeper and deeper, the bonuses will grow quite substantially. So the Tier 2 and Tier 3 Golden Ages are very effective. Tier 1 is a very nice boost at the beginning, but it's not a matter of life and death. Now, for a brief moment, you could see Leenock adding a stable, so he knows very well that there is going to be longbows coming his way, and with that, he should be able to repel Mista's aggression unless Mista adds spears. Now, I did not see Mista going for a single spearman so far, so I would suspect that for now he's just going to be playing with a couple of longbows, archers coming in. That's going to be camel archers. This is going to be horseman plus camel archer combination, something that the Abbasids have a very effective combination with, especially against spears and longbows, the English composition, because the camel archers can deal with the spearmen very effectively. It's all about the fact that camel archers take 2 shots to kill a spearman, so it's very easy to get rid of 1 or 2 spears and support your horseman with it. Leenock gets a visual confirmation on the army's position for Mista, sees the longbows coming in. He also sees that there is not a single spearman supporting, and I'm not gonna lie, so far, this wasn't a super impressive build from Mista. I mean, it's good old-fashioned longbow rush, but I don't know, I was expecting a little more from Mista here, given the fact that he's really good with the English. I was expecting something maybe out of the box, or something that's less conventional, right? There's nothing wrong with this build. He's going to send forward a couple of longbows, and you could see for a brief moment he's hiding longbows in that stealth forest, deploy the palings preemptively. It's a clever move. So what he's going to try and do is bait the opponent's cavalry into that stealth forest, and then sort of stun them with those palings. That's a clever idea. Now, one thing that he needs to ensure for that to work is to kill the opponent's scout, or at least make sure he's not nearby, because if Leenock sees that, he's not going to commit against that, of course. But this could be a very clever move. Very cheeky, very clever. If he can get 1 or 2 horseman kills at the beginning, that's already nice value for those longbows. For now, he's at 12 longbows, no signs of spearmen for him. Whereas on the other side, Leenock is going for what seems to be the second town center indeed. He's going to have the stone, he's going to have the wood for that. You gotta wonder where exactly he's going to place it. I would think it's going to be on one of the wood lines. There is going to be a gold mine here, so this might be the best spot for it. But you also have to consider something for Leenock. He needs to make sure that that town center goes up, so he might not go very aggressive with the town center placement because... Oh, we zoomed in for a brief moment. I looked away, and all I see is a huge tower. I was like, what was that? Huge tower in my face, and then I realized we're zoomed in. Those are the palings deployed indeed. These are preemptive palings, and it's basically a trap setup for the Abbasid player. Mista will try to bait those horsemen in there, and as they close in, they won't see the longbows in the stealth forest. They will charge into those palings, and they will be stunned, they will be damaged, and this is a window that Mista can utilize to pick off the horsemen with the longbows. Now, he has to play this one very patiently and very carefully, because he's playing with fire here. Here come the horsemen. He's going to call off his forces. You see preemptive palings once again. Oh, he moved the longbows from the stealth forest, right? He moved the longbows. That's a disaster. That's an absolute disaster out here. The entire plan was relying on him using those palings, and they're just nowhere to be found. Absolute disaster here for Mista. He's now deploying a new patch of palings, but this is an absolute disaster for him. He's getting so many longbows picked apart. Ultimately, the tower fire, the network of castles bonus, and the longbows will help cleaning up all these horsemen, but this definitely didn't go the way that he imagined it initially. He seemed like he was just pushing forward with all the longbows. I don't think that he expected Leenock to counterattack. I think he was waiting there saying, look, he's not coming, so I might as well go forward and try to do some damage. And it was possibly just the worst moment to move out, because the moment he moved out, his opponent started pushing up with the horsemen as well. You gotta wonder if Leenock saw that trap. That's something I can imagine. Leenock still has his scout alive, so it's possible that he saw the trap. Now Mista is in serious trouble. He's got no farming eco setup, basically nothing going for him economy-wise, nowhere close to castle age, minimal chance to do damage here. This is a disastrous position for Mista to be in, to be honest. He's got the line formation set up with the longbows, so he's gonna be able to maximize his damage output. He might have a window to do damage here, because it looks like Leenock is going to send the forces, at least the cavalry, to the north. He will probably loop around, try to hit the enemy base. So, horsemen coming over like this. This could give a nice window for Mista to push. The question is, what does Leenock have back at home? Leenock only has a couple of archers back at home and supported by, I think, 1 or 2 horsemen. Leenock has 5 horsemen in total, and I think 4 of them are launching counterattack. This could be a disaster for Leenock. Longbows now opening up on the lumberjacks, and the thing is that those horsemen, they might have to circle back from behind, simply because they will be needed back at home to hold this off. Without those horsemen, I'm not sure if you can hold this one. Now, it looks like the horsemen are still continuing their journey towards the base of Mista, and Mista has absolutely no defense back at home against those. He's got the English villagers, however, so at least he can shoot back at them. with the arrows from the villagers instead of just fighting in melee. He's sending a couple of longbows here to try and deny a tower, and that he succeeds in. Horseman ready to jump on the gold mine, and it looks like Mist is mining stone. So Mista just wanted to amp up the pressure and then potentially drop a second town center behind this one himself. He's going to see the horseman, but he doesn't even have a barracks. First horseman will be taken down by the English town center. Other horsemen for now denying the gold income. Meanwhile, for Mista, he's crawling closer and closer to the opponent's eco though. And one of the things that right now Leenock doesn't have access to is wood, which is also going to make it much more difficult to make horsemen. Looks like stone is being mined quite relentlessly here by Leenock. I wonder if he wants to go for an arrow slits emplacement on his towers. Indeed, that's exactly what he's doing. He's got that tower up and he's going for arrow slits on it. And he's now preparing one big counterattack here with horsemen and archers. His force is still at the back of Mista's base, and he will just come back every once in a while, try to pick off one or two villagers. So he will just use that force to sort of at least distract Mista every once in a while, pick off some villagers, or just force him to stay back with some forces. Now, the numbers that are growing up in the base, or at least in front of the base of Leenock, are getting concerning. Because Mista is reaching the critical mass of longbows that, especially with palings, could do a ton of damage to whatever unit is coming their way. For now, Mista is not using a single farm here, so this is basically the direct opposite of Mista did in basically all the previous sets with the English. Now, of course, it's possible that part of the reason why he's doing it is because he wants to sort of just show something different than what he did before and surprise the opponent. But I feel like if he just does what he did in the previous sets, that would be more effective than this one, because now the archers are launching a counterattack, and Abbasids don't need to research the upgrade to be able to make siege weapons. It's very possible that Mista will be facing 2 or 3 battering rams pushing his base in a matter of seconds, and Leenock will just launch a counterattack. I don't even think that Mista knows about it yet. Mista is slowly crawling up. He might even get 1 or 2 villager kills on that wood line soon, but I don't think he has any idea about those forces launching a counterattack, and this could be a disaster. In fact, what Leenock needs to do is wait. He shouldn't just pop out the archers, not even the horsemen probably. Just try to get some rams going, because that way he would do even more damage. Horsemen do arrive to the base of Mista. Mista will be forced away from the gold mine, and you see, Mista was completely unprepared for this one. Now he's going to retaliate on the other side by picking off some lumberjacks. Does Leenock have enough wood for rams? He doesn't. Oh, this is so tricky, because both players definitely have something going for them. Both players do have a formidable force in front of the opponent's base, but I get the feel that it's going to be more difficult for Mista to do damage. Leenock still has some cavalry. He could technically burn down a tower. He has a critical mass of archers. I think he's actually committing. He's committing against the town center of the opponent. Indeed, this might be a little overly ambitious, but if it pays off, it's going to pay off big time. The lumberjacks will have to make a run for that, and that could be a game-ending move for Mista. All of those lumberjacks are running to the wrong side. There is nothing there. There's absolutely nothing over there, and with that, the archers will just pursue. This is the absolute perfect scenario for Leenock. He knows very well that he just needs to pursue the opponent, and Mista is reacting to this one saying, look, if he's committing against all my villagers, I will have to do the same thing. I think Mista is just pulling those vills, trying to snipe down landmarks. That's a signature Mista move. If he feels like he's losing, he's just sending in all the villagers kamikaze, sniping down all the landmarks. That's not gonna work over here. That's obvious. I think if he really believed that he has a chance, he would have just jumped into those towers and said, okay, I'm going to at least keep some of my villagers alive on those towers. Now he's going to jump into his forward towers, and he's making a battering ram. So he's going to try and make one last hurrah happen over here. But he's down to 25 villagers. Realistically speaking, it would be a miracle if he could push this one. Truth being told, the entire army of Leenock is in the middle of the map. So the only thing that Leenock currently has against the battering ram is villagers. And that's a lot of longbows that can kill vills. This could be very tricky. Mista is completely out of wood, completely out of food income. So Mista only has 1 battering ram to work with. That's his biggest problem. And he can't even just make a lumber camp at the front with the villagers that he has just brought up. That's the biggest concern for him. His entire eco is idle. Nothing. Nothing back at home. There's 1 villager that is now waiting over there. So what can you do? You don't even have a drop-off site here. You see, he tried to chop some wood, but he can't drop it off right now. Battering ram now coming in for Leenock. He's on the way to Castle Age, which will also make that culture ring or that entire House of Wisdom a little stronger. Leenock should be able to win this game. But how is he going to stop those villagers and the rams torching down his buildings? We have seen instances of this before. One thing that Leenock doesn't have is military numbers. 33 to 22 is the army count, And that group of longbows for Mista should be able to fight off the army of Leenock here. This could be huge. This could be huge because the House of Wisdom is slowly being burned down. Villagers are burning down town center. And you gotta ask yourself a question. Will Leenock react in time? Now, obviously, everybody would probably say, yes, of course. He's just waiting for a big group of army to pile up. He's getting some lancers going, potentially. But we have seen the Muslim lose somewhat similarly to this, to Mista. Having Abbasids, having the House of Wisdom, having the town center, and just saying, oh yeah, I have time. But you gotta be careful. The town center is at like 60% HP. This is so cheesy. I mean, obviously Mista is going all in here. But he's being bought a lot of time. The House of Wisdom is at like 40% HP. The town center is sitting at like 50. Looks like the battering ram is still moving around. Slowly but surely, the towers of Mista are being cleaned up. I think Mista's chances are lower than 1%. I think he's... is he tapping out? He was typing something on the chat. You could see his hand moving. Here comes the push. Horseman will soak up most of the arrow fire. Battering ram still knocking on the town center at least. Longbows are still standing strong, however. Does Mista have a critical mass here to somehow take this? I don't think so. Leenock is going to send all the villagers. He knows very well that this is everything that Mista has. He's focusing down the villagers and now he's typing the GG. Mista, he's laughing on this. He knows very well that his game here was lost. And it just came down to the fact that he's going to try something cheesy. He's going to try and salvage this game. But realistically speaking, this should have never worked for him, and it didn't. He tried to go for the most obvious, most straightforward way of playing the English, and it did not work for him. Ultimately, the Abbasids take the win here, and Leenock stays alive. He's going into game number 6 being down 1 game, and it's still match point for his opponent. And now we're looking at the remaining maps, and now we're looking at the remaining civilizations for the players for a brief moment, because with 7 maps being in the map pool, if we go to 7 games, all of those will be utilized. So what we still have left as a map is, I believe, Highview. No, Highview was used. Highview, Dry Arabia, Lipany, King of the Hill, Altai were used. So Mongolian Heights is still an option, and Hillandale. Neither of the maps are standard open maps here. We would go to the selection of Mista, because he's the one losing this game. And looking at civilizations, you still have HRE available for both, Chinese available for both. And why are my numbers incorrect? Leenock, did Leenock use his Mongols? I might have forgot to cross it out. Yeah, Leenock used up his Mongols, so Leenock doesn't have the Mongols available anymore. So looking at the civilizations, it is going to be Chinese and HRE remaining, and we might see HRE mirrors, we might see Chinese mirrors, or we might see HRE versus Chinese. But one thing is sure, we either have 2 mirrors for the final 2 games, possibly, or we're going to see the identical matchup. It is just going to come down to whoever is controlling the HRE and whoever is controlling the Chinese. Game number 6, coming in a matter of seconds between Leenock and Mista. Mista still at match point. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TheMista versus Leenock. We are jumping into game number 6. Match point for Mista still, and it looks like we're going into a Holy Roman Empire mirror here. Spawning in on the left side is going to be Leenock playing as the red HRE, and on the right side, we'll have Mista playing as the blue HRE as well. As you see the player POVs, looks like the heart rate monitor is now gone. Not exactly sure when that's displayed and when it is not displayed, but it is what it is. So we're going to have Mista on the right, Leenock on the left. Of course, there are some small deviations in the build orders of the players here, but ultimately this is going to come down to a fight for the relics. So once we'll see the entire map and once we see where all the relics are positioned, we'll get a clearer picture of who could possibly have an edge over the opponent. Leenock is operating with 2 scouts over here so far, quite successful collecting sheep. Whereas on the other side, for Mista, I think he was only playing with 1 scout for the time being. Leenock is empowering his villagers under the TC for food gathering, whereas on the other side you will have the gold miners, also affected, I believe, by Mista. Did I just see a second product come out for Leenock? It seems like it. Because if you take a look at Leenock's base, he had 0 gold for some time. So I would think Does he have a second prelate? No, he doesn't have a second prelate. I'm just losing my mind on the mathematics over here. For a brief moment, I thought that he was mining some gold and then he made the second prelate. But nope, he still has just one, so he just sent that one to the north. Looking at the relics anyways, we will have one that's very close to Mista's base. That's definitely going to be helpful for him. This is pretty much guaranteed Mista. This should be guaranteed Leenock, which leaves us with 3 relics contested. And if you look at the left side, these two are wide open for picking for either of these players. Might be slightly better for Leenock, and the reason why is because it is easier to approach it from this direction. Here. Because one of the problems that Mista could possibly have is that there's a long ridge here in his base, so his central exit is actually facing north. Now this could help picking up this relic for him, because that's definitely accessible for his side, but I would think that Leenock has a slight edge gathering relics, mainly because the exit that Mista would use to leave his base to collect the relics on the left side are quite a bit towards the right, so it would take quite a lot of time for him to walk out there. Alken Chapel now coming up for Leenock. It's going to affect the lumberjacks, it's going to affect the villagers on the food, but it's not going to affect the gold miners. Stone miners, not so significant, so it's a decent Alken Chapel, but it's not going to be spectacular. Given the circumstances, that's probably the best that you can place for Leenock, but it's not an admirable position for him to be in. Meanwhile, for our blue player Mista, I think he's got a pretty good Alken Chapel spot if I just look at the minimap. That seems to be in between the gold, the town center, and the wood, so he should have all the resources covered with it. That's going to be a great Alken Chapel over there. 2 scouts right now indeed for Leenock, 1 only for our blue player Mista, which means that Mista has a villager lead, and indeed, there is the Alken Chapel. That's a beautiful spot to place that. Lumberjacks, gold miners, food villagers. You might even have the berry villagers affected by it, which is a nice cherry on top of that cake. Feudal Age is in for both players. We do have Leenock coming in with a bit of a harassment using that extra scout. That's one of the things that you get by having an extra scout. You can apply a little bit more pressure towards the opponent's gold mining operation. And you could see that for a brief moment, Mista is adding a stable here. So he's thinking about going for horsemen. Keep in mind that Mista does something that a few others also do. He builds a building to like 90% completion, and then he waits for the opponent, sees what kind of reaction his opponent is having, and then potentially deletes it, because if he does that, he's going to get a full refund. So that is something that Mista often does. So until his building is actually finished, I'm not going to believe that he's going to complete that stable. He likely will, but this is one of the things that you always have to consider, especially when you're looking at Mista. Oftentimes he places that building as a decoy and then changes it to something else. Meanwhile, for Leenock, he is going for full fast castle, and it looks like Mista is going double stable. Double stable full horseman here. He isn't messing around. Now, Leenock probably was suspecting this one coming his way, and the reason why is because his scout saw the one villager on the gold. And that's a sign that Mista is likely going for feudal age aggression. If Mista wanted to go for fast castle, he would keep more villagers on gold, like Leenock is doing right now. So, the amount of villagers on gold is quite telling. And this is something that's going to tell Leenock, oh shoot, there could be some feudal age pressure coming my way. Now, Mista is sending some villagers onto gold. We're going to have some horsemen coming out. But Leenock's reaction is already out there with the barracks. And the concerning thing right now for Mista is that at this point, Leenock is going to have the spearmen to defend against this one. And Leenock is going to beat his opponent to castle age over here, because Leenock didn't invest a ton of resources into this pressure. There is one accomplishment that Mista's gonna have with these horsemen though, and that is forcing the opponent to make 2 barracks. And of course, the spearmen will hold off the horsemen, but the idea is that Leenock won't really be able to establish map control with spearmen. They're much slower, take a lot more time to walk to the Dale area. They can escort the prelates very easily, but of course, their lack of movement could actually be problematic. Whereas for Mista, he would have a high mobility army. So that's the only positive thing I can say here for Mista. He's getting close to Castle Age himself, but of course, his opponent, Leenock, is getting even closer than that. You could see, oh, here come the villagers. This could be good. Looks like the villager will be spotted, so Mista's going to change his mind here, but the idea was that he wants to restrict the movement on the left side. I'm fairly certain that Mista is aware that he won't be able to wall his opponent in entirely, but even just having that wall up here is immensely valuable because it pretty much secures the southern side of the map for Mista. Look at this. In fact, given how narrow this crossing is over here, if he completes this wall here, he technically could just wall this off as well. Would be a little cheeky, but if you think about that, that would guarantee 3 relics for him. Anyways, horsemen are still active here. Mista getting close to Castle Age, and let's be honest, it looks like the spearman is going to brace, but it's only one spearman to fight against all those horsemen. The prelate was pulled to heal up the spearman. Looks like the spearman is actually getting away from the battle. 2 more spearmen join the fun, and Leenock does not lose a single unit. The magical thing here for Mista is that he's able to match the opponent's Castle Age time, despite the fact that he invested quite a lot into those horsemen. Now keep in mind that Mista was operating with 1 extra villager over the opponent for some time, because Leenock added a second scout. But the more important thing is that Mista's got 3 prelates. So not only is he affecting his gold miners, the lumberjacks, and the villagers underneath the town center with the Aachen Chapel, he was boosting the berry villagers and the hunt villagers as well. So he had a good food eco. Now Leenock is moving towards those relics as we speak. The gold miners are still potentially under attack by the horsemen, and I don't think that Leenock was expecting those horsemen to be there. One would expect those horsemen to try and kill prelates, not villagers, and that's a great move from Mista. He's going to get a jump on those villagers. There is going to be 1 casualty, potentially 2, and that is exactly the move that Mista needed. The spearmen were mispositioned. Now the horsemen will disengage, the scout gets taken down, but I think Leenock was expecting those horsemen to try and kill the prelates, not the villagers. Leenock is going to open by picking up 2 relics immediately. Mista going for that relic as well, but he's going to miss out on that one and the one on the left as well. On the right side, the relic, is that falling into the hands of Leenock as well? It's 2 relics for each player right now, you can see it at the top. Those are the relics carried by the prelates. The only relic that has not been picked up just yet is up top. Currently, it's being looked at by the horseman of Mista though, so that could give a slight edge for Mista to pick it up. It would be a somewhat unlikely scenario that he ends up picking up the relic all the way on the north, which in theory is the easiest for Leenock to capture, but it looks like Leenock wasn't really focusing a lot on that part of the map, so this could give a nice edge for Mista to capture that last relic on the north. For now, it's going to be 2 versus 2 on the relic department. Red dots moving towards that final relic. As you see, we have Mista also sending some forces that way. I would assume that those are spearmen, and indeed they are, which means that it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, for Mista to pick up that relic right now. One thing that he can hope for, though, is he can intercept the prelate. I think that could be a possibility. The prelate right now running into the stealth forest, so for a brief moment Mista had vision on it, and I think he knows that the prelate is out there. He knows that he needs to snipe that. He's got some knights over here, or does he? Nope, he only has horsemen. So it's going to be much more difficult to pick off that last prelate, but of course the idea is clear. You want to make sure that you kill the prelate out there. Meanwhile, sacred sites are being captured by Mista as we speak, and he's sending the horsemen all the way to the back. Wonder what exactly he has on his mind, because he seemed to have just stopped pursuing that prelate. Instead, he's realizing that his opponent has no spearmen back at home. The spears were all sent out to escort the prelate, opening up a window for the horsemen to get a couple of villager kills. In the end, Leenock is able to secure that 3rd relic, but keep in mind that Leenock lost a couple of villagers, and his opponent Mista is also capping sacred sites. So there could be a window here, especially if Leenock gets denied from the food, that Mista still has the better eco. That would be weird, because his opponent is going to have 3 relics over 2, as we're seeing some Landsknechte being added. Landsknechte will, of course, deal very well with the spearmen, and I think that at this point for Mista, what he needs to hope for is that he's pinning his opponent back in his base, because if he can do that, as he picks off another villager at the front gate, if he can pin the opponent inside his base, he can capture the sacred sites, thereby compensating for the lower amount of relics he has. Gotta love the move that he hit the Prelate in that Stealth Forest. So even if the Sacred Site gets decapped, if the Prelate survives, and he should have a fairly high chance of surviving, he can just cap it back. That's a very clever thing to do for Mista. Knights will charge in. The Spearman does brace against this one, but there is the Prelate to heal it up, so ultimately that Sacred Site will remain under the control of Mista. Now, one thing that Leenock doesn't have is map control, and you see another villager was picked off on the north by a knight. You're seeing knight numbers increase quite heavily here for Mista, but the bigger thing is that he's going to have some Landsknechte, and as long as those walls are open in the north, he's going to have the chance to raid with those knights. This is match point for Mista, and it's getting better and better for him, because he's slowly taking over in terms of villager count, but the real thing is that as long as those walls are open, the mobility component that Mista has over his opponent is going to be a factor. Those knights being able to circle around the base of Leenock, picking off villagers left and right, could be massive. And of course, using this distraction, Mista can secure map control, start capping sacred sites, and compensate for the fact that he has one less relic garrisoned in the Ragnitz Cathedral. Spearmen now will encounter the Landsknechte, and those will be wiped out rather easily. Horseman will have a bad day, jumps into the Spearman, and dies. Knights will disengage for the time being, and you see Leenock will try to get those walls up. Leenock is also banking up resources for Imperial, so the plan is obvious. Go for Imperial, go for Palace of Swabia. On the other hand, Mista has different plans. He's going for a Landsknechte. This is a risky play because that unit is very fragile. So even just one Mangonel could wipe out half of them in one shot. So there is some risk associated with the fact that Mista is putting so much trust in his Landsknechte. This being said, he's going to have the two sacred sites under his control, and he's got quite a substantial amount of Landsknecht on the battlefield. We're talking about 10. His opponent, Leenock, has comparable military numbers. He's at 17 army as opposed to 23. But Leenock's army is basically just Spearmen. 12 Spearmen, 2 Landsknechte, that's it. And this is where things could get a little problematic for Leenock. His doors are being knocked on. He's now dropping barracks so he can add some more Landsknechte. And you see, he's pretty much going to give up, or at least delay his Castle Age timing, or Imperial Age timing actually, just so that he can get the Landsknecht out. He's realizing that he needs to do something against that infantry, but as long as, of course, he's pinned inside his own base, he's gonna be in trouble. Villagers are actually being pursued by a wolf. Some of them are so low HP that the wolf could get some kills. Here come the Landsknecht, and those, if they jump on lumberjacks, they can kill them in 5 seconds. Seriously. The massive area damage output of those Landsknecht make them very dangerous raiding units, because on clustered up villagers, especially wood lines or gold mines, those are prime targets for Landsknecht. For now, it looks like Leenock is going to commit a lot to this defense, and suddenly we're going to see the Landsknecht starting to trade off against each other. The Knights are actually a very good unit to help here, as the Spearmen will also join the fun. This is not a fight that Leenock wants to take, however. Landsknecht are great versus mass light infantry, but guess what? The pure numbers seem to be better, and maybe, just maybe, Leenock is going to be able to push back Mista for the time being. Mista will have to regroup, but of course Mista was focusing a lot of emphasis, or putting a lot of emphasis on making knights as well. Now those knights won't be able to help in a direct battle, but they can burn their way through the left side, and if you look at Leenock, he doesn't have mobility. Once again, it's the mobility component that's missing for Leenock, and if those knights get into the food eco, that could be an absolute disaster. Now it looks like we're going to have some spearmen being added once again by Leenock, so he's going to have something back at home to defend against this. In the middle, a sacred site is being decapped. Up north, a sacred site is being capped. So once again, Mista maintains control over 2 sacred sites, potentially even having 3 for a brief moment. Knights trying to poke around the eco of Leenock. Leenock is down to 40 army, so he's going to have quite a lot of units on the battlefield. Mista at 32 right now, 33. Mista's push here seems to stall out a tiny bit. Looks like the sacred sites were, like, at least the sacred site victory was triggered for a brief moment, but Leenock decaps the sacred site really fast, so that was just a distant dream for Mista at this point. And you see Leenock is trying to cut off the escape path of those knights. He did not expect those spearmen to be there, and it's a trap. It's a beautiful trap, but it looks like the knights will find a way out of this one. And now, outmaneuvering all that infantry, they could head straight back into the base of Leenock. As you see, in the middle, you also have infantry pushing in, and that's exactly the plan. The walls are incomplete. There is some more spears over here on the left side, but I think Mista can just commit against this one. He can run straight in, knowing that his opponent has much lower mobility, and as this distraction is happening, he can hit the wood line, and the Landsknecht can kill villagers in just a matter of split seconds. They're running away from the vote line right now, but that two-pronged attack for Mista could potentially propel him into the semifinals, because now Leenock is struggling to keep his villagers alive. Look at the villager count dropping. 42 villagers, that was 50 just a couple of seconds ago. Dead bodies lying everywhere, and as the Landsknechte and Spearmen are busy pursuing all those knights, the rest of the Landsknechte here from Mista are doing work. You can see piles of dead bodies. The villager count was even just a minute ago, and now the Landsknechte did all the work. 39 villagers remain, as this nice narrow choke point is a great place to fight for Mista. He's going to trade off his own Landsknechte to Spearman and the infantry of the enemy. And if we looked at the kill-death ratio, I am fairly certain that this would be heavily in the favor of Mista right now. Mista was able to take a great fight here. He's a little low on gold, which will mean that it's going to be difficult for him to replenish his Landsknechte. He's still adding some more knights, but now he has a 15 villagers lead. And as long as both players are in Castle Age, this is a very nice 15 villagers lead for him. Definitely compensating for his slightly lower gold income from the relics. He only has one sacred site right now under his control, and he's going to lose 2 knights in the middle though, so he still has to respect the fact that Leenock has 37 army as opposed to 14 of his. And you gotta wonder what exactly the response is going to be here for Mista. In theory, he could think about archers, because his opponent is mostly making just spearmen and Landsknechte. Once again, the infantry are trying to cut off the escape path of those knights. Mista still running circles around the enemy in his base. You can expect him to keep doing that for the next 15-20 minutes if needed, simply because he wants to pin Leenock inside his base. Mista's floating a ton of food, but he's disturbingly low on gold. He's got 1100 gold per minute, so you gotta wonder what exactly he's spending it on. I think he had a bunch of units queued up, and he just cancelled some of them. He wants to go to Imperial now. I think this is where Mista is realizing that, okay, I don't have a chance to break the stalemate, but I need to make sure I don't fall behind the imp timing, because all that villager killing that I have done, if my opponent gets to Imperial faster than I do, then I'm just going to get outboomed by the Palace of Swabia. So both players will try to make a run for Imperial, and suddenly the army numbers are getting very concerning for Mista. Very, very concerning. And you gotta wonder if he should start thinking about voling up himself, because at this point it's 16 army as opposed to 45. For now, Leenock isn't committing, as we do have Imperial Age coming in for what I believe is both players. Indeed, Swabia on the way for Leenock to the south, and there should be a Palace of Swabia coming in as well for Mista. But the difference between the two players is that Leenock has doubled the army, and that is growing in terms of how concerning it is. Mista's got a good farming eco here. He also has some hunt to work with. But guess what? Here comes the push at his base. Landsknechte numbers are actually comparable, but the spearmen will swing the battle in the favor of Leenock, at least for the time being. But the infantry is clustered up, and the mangonel fire could wipe out the infantry so easily. We've talked about this before. Landsknechte are so fragile that a single mangonel shot can do a ton of damage on them. Beautiful mangonel shot, damaging the Landsknechte, wiping out a couple of them. And a second mangonel shot could easily get rid of some of that infantry out there. Looks like for now, Leenock is going to call off his forces. This is Leenock's tournament life on the line, by the way. Both players up to Imperial. Leenock slight advantage going into Imp here. And for now, he's going to be the aggressor, starting to add villagers on the Pass of Swabia. Whereas behind this one, Mista, I assume he's going up to Imperial too, right? I would think he is. But if Mista is not going up to Imperial, he's in trouble. He's definitely still in Castle Age, but I'm starting to wonder if he's actually going up. If he's not going up, all that villager advantage that he had is going to be gone in the next second. And if you think about it, he's behind by 1 relic, so suddenly Leenock would take over really fast. You see that villager discrepancy is disappearing so rapidly. 56 versus 64. Soon that's gonna be 64 versus 64. I don't think Mista is going up. I don't think Mista is going up, and that could be an absolute disaster. Because if without Imperial Age here, he could be in serious trouble. Now, the infantry is coming back, the mangonel is setting up, it unleashes a volley, and indeed it wipes out most of the infantry that remains in Leenock's army. Mista's villager lead is pretty much gone here. He's down 1 relic, and he has no sacred sites right now. But one thing that he has is slightly better army numbers compared to his opponent. You see, it's 16 army only for Leenock, 32 for Mista, so double the army. And we have seen actually something very similar to this in game number 1. Or was it game number 2? It was the French game for Mista, where he seemed like he was just gonna fall apart with his opponent having Imperial Age and him not. But then he just went and doubled out on that Castle Age push and ultimately finished off Leenock. Mangonel is now setting up, and one thing that Leenock doesn't have an answer to is the Mangonel, and that could be overly concerning, because as long as your army is mostly Landsknechte, you could potentially get overrun by the Mangonel. This is very risky for Mista, and in a game where he was definitely leading, or at least he was even with his opponent, now it's possibly a lead for Leenock, but this lead could easily be taken away, because as you see, houses are being burned down. That's a great way to sort of minimize the effect of that pass of Schwabia, because the Schwabia trains the villagers so fast that you have to constantly make houses to make sure you don't get housed, and by burning down the houses, it's going to be difficult for Leenock to maintain production on the Schwabia, and in general maintain production on his buildings when it comes to producing army. First Springald now added here by Leenock. The cavalry is trying to jump on that. So far the Springald has been held back, and now the villagers are being pulled. The Landsknechte will massacre all of them. Mangonel fire coming in. That's an absolute blunder there for Leenock. Losing all the villagers to the Landsknechte. I don't know if he didn't see them or he just trusted them so much. And of course, replacing them is still a possibility with the Schwabia. But you gotta wonder if losing 50 villas like that is something that's worth it. Especially because it's not like his army is going to be able to hold this off anyways. Landsknechte once again setting up Mangonel fire, opening up once again. Still, the Schwabia is there to replenish those villagers, but Leenock is losing and sacrificing his entire eco, stopping this. The Mangonel warriors wipe out wave after wave of infantry pushes, supported by the Landsknechte, and this is Leenock's tournament life on the line. Maybe he just overestimated the capabilities of the pass of Schwabia to replenish those villagers, because it really feels like he just wanted to pull the vills, knowing that he can rebuild them. He's pulling more. He feels like Mista is all in, but that's not the case. And that's the thing here. If Mista wipes out all the villagers, he's going to steamroll his opponent, and the Landsknechte are the perfect tool to do this. Look at those swords being swung, and look at all the villagers going down. Leenock is down to 38 eco, and that is his tournament life on the line. And as he's losing the villagers, he's going to struggle more and more to replenish the army. He can replenish the villagers, but Mista can also replenish his army, that's the thing. And as long as Mista is sending in wave after wave of infantry over here to kill all the army from Leenock, Leenock won't have the window to rebuild that eco. Right now it's 72 eco versus 38, and when the dust settles, we're looking at Mista, who still has an opportunity to push the opponent's base, yet Leenock no longer has the economy to make more army. Mista once again going full Castle Age, and you see Leenock is rebuilding that villager count. The problem that he's having is that now he's got no food eco. And this is what I was referring to. Rebuilding the villagers is one thing. Being able to make army is a different thing. And even though there is going to be a bombard that helps against the Mangonels, you get the feel that now, with the base of Leenock lying wide open, you can just keep pressuring those farming eco. And once you do that, it's going to be difficult for Leenock to be able to replenish his army. Now, looks like he's back on track when it comes to the Landsknechte numbers, and he's going to be able to wall himself off. That's massive. The ability to keep those walls alive will be extremely important, because now Leenock gets a window. And this is what I was talking about with that window. You need to have some time until you rebuild your villagers. And he managed to buy himself some time. The problem for Mista right now is that he's still in Castle Age. So, as I said, no matter how many villagers he kills, his opponent will be able to rebuild them. The question is, can you finish the game before the opponent rebuilds his eco? Mista not messing around, trying to burn down the walls once again. If those lumberjacks are being hit by the Landsknechte, once again, 50 plus villagers will be wiped out here. Another layer being added right now by Leenock. He's realizing that he needs time above all. The most valuable resource right now for Leenock, a resource that he's somewhat missing, is going to be time. He needs to buy himself at least a minute or so, but I think there is an overchop, and now the Landsknechte jump on the lumberjacks. Numbers steadily growing here for Leenock. He's got 17 Landsknechte himself, and those are elite, whereas the opponent doesn't have the elite upgrade on them just yet, of course. If the Mangonel comes in here for Mista, that could swing things around, and that's a very narrow choke point for Leenock to be in. I think Mista is thinking about it. If he can somehow cluster up all those elite Landsknechte in that choke point, one Mangonel shot could wipe out the army here. But did I see... For a brief moment from the hand movements, I thought Mista was going to resign. Because you know that at some point, you're going to have to get to Imperial. Now, it seems like this is the window where Mista is realizing that, okay, he won't be able to finish this game in Castle Age. Culverins are being added, that's a good move from Leenock. With the Culverins out there, he's going to be able to snap down the Mangonels. Now, one thing that Mista could have done is potentially start capping sacred sites, so he's able to capitalize on that map control. And as weird as it sounds like, after all those battles going on, it looks like we're going into what seems to be a long game, because Mista is getting ready for Imperial. He still has the villager lead, but that will soon disappear because, of course, the Pass of Swabia is working to great effect here for Leenock. Still, at least Mista has the Dale area under his control, and one thing that Leenock will have to be respectful towards is the fact that he's slowly running out of resources at the top of the hill. So he's gonna have to respect the fact that his opponent has the Dale area under his control, and he himself is going to slowly start running out of resources, and that will be an issue that he needs to address. Elite army tactics now coming in for Leenock. That's going to buff the infantry quite substantially. And with the elite upgrade already in for both the spears and the Landsknechte, right now the army is looking way better for Leenock compared to Mista. Mista still in Castle Age, but he's on the way to Imperial. And when the dust settles, we're going to see two players with pretty much identical villager counts. Mista is now up to Imperial. Upgrades will be similar on those units. Numbers will be somewhat similar. And really the only major difference in the long run between the two players will be the fact that Leenock has a second or a third relic in that Ragnis Cathedral as compared to his opponent, Mista, just having two. Mista is starting to mine stones, so you get the feel that he might start thinking about just turtling this forward. Starting to fortify the middle, he's trying to go for Elite Landsknechte as we speak. He's still keeping his opponent inside his base with the cavalry, and I like that a lot. Because this way, he's able to at least divert some attention from Leenock towards that area. Mista started sending villagers towards stone, so he definitely wants to go for a castle at some point. Culverins are setting up. This is something that will be spotted by Mista. He even loses 2 Landsknechte to the Culverins. Spearmen will be dispatched to the north. But of course, for Mista, he's just waiting for the elite upgrade to come in. He knows very well that he can't take this fight right now, so he's just trying to delay the opponent as much as possible, trying to buy himself time to get the elite upgrades. Culverins are ready to set up, however, but that's a lot of Landsknechte, all clustered up, and there is a Mangonel hiding in the stealth forest. There is a chance Leenock won't notice that. Some Mangonels are sent to the north to deal with the spears, but there's a legitimate chance that Leenock would not notice 2 Mangonels hiding in that stealth forest, and that would be sufficient to wipe out all of those Landsknechte. Mista up to 50 army, 65 is the number for Leenock. And you see, Leenock is also playing a bit of a positional warfare over here, hiding the Landsknechte. And now, this farming eco down south could be exposed to some aggression. I don't think Leenock knows about that farming eco down south. If he knew about it, he would send a couple of Landsknechte here and he would find quite a lot of kills. Looks like we're seeing knights and horsemen increasing in numbers, and you gotta wonder... You just gotta wonder if Mista doesn't want to fight this directly, instead swing north, and maybe even try landmark snipe. We have seen Mista doing that against the Muslim. Of course, that was a much later or much longer game. But at the end of the day, Mista has the mobility and he knows that. If he builds up a large force of cavalry, stalls out the push in the middle with stone walls, for instance, it's a possibility for him to break into Leenock's base and potentially even try to snap landmarks. Now that's going to be difficult against the HRE because, keep in mind, that the HRE have the emergency repairs ability on the buildings, but at least the possibility is there for Mista. We're seeing some elite man-at-arms hit the field for Leenock. The army for Mista still seems to be inferior compared to Leenock's one. Leenock has men-at-arms, some Landsknechte, some spearmen, castle being placed as we speak, and it looks like a counterattack with some horsemen was sent north. That's not really going to work out that well, or is it? Oh, nope. Not at all. Not at all. It looks like the horsemen tried to sandwich themselves in between that wall and the cliff, but that failed. Wasn't really able to get through there, so some horsemen will be taken down. Leenock very nicely recovered from that initial damage that he took, and now he's unleashing the spearmen on the enemy. I don't think Mista was expecting that, and he's running straight into the middle. Mangonel's opening fire, however, horsemen now jumping on the siege weapons of Leenock, and suddenly, Leenock wasn't expecting those Mangonels to set up and take down his own infantry. Mista, however, distracted, and he didn't notice his villagers being killed. Mangonel's opening up against those men-at-arms, however. Men-at-arms already taking quite a lot of damage here. First Mangonel could be taken down. Second Mangonel could be taken down as well. Third one on the north was also destroyed. Mangonel still got some nice volleys out though, so many of those man-at-arms are damaged. Mista just now realizing that his eco is being raided, and I think he's typing GG at this point. He knows that his army isn't able to stand up against Leenock's one, and Leenock one extra relic under his control. That definitely helped a lot, and the ability to stall out this push, buy himself some time to rebuild the eco, that was the key thing here. Leenock wins game number 6 here, and with that, we're going into game number 7 with a Chinese mirror on Mongolian Heights. Mista was leading in this set for some time, but we have to mention that as much as I said before that Mongols in the hands of Mista, English in the hands of Mista are very dangerous, Chinese is an extremely dangerous civilization in the hands of Leenock. In fact, going into this last game here, I would think that if I have to predict who would win a Chinese mirror, I would probably go with Leenock. He's got the momentum and he's got the knowledge of Chinese civilization. This is gonna be quite a significant uphill battle for Mista possibly. Game number 7, it all goes down to just one game to decide whoever gets into the semifinals of N4C. Ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't get any bigger than this. 3-3 is the score. One game to decide who gets into the semifinals of the $100,000 N4C, and we're going to Mongolian Heights. Spawning in on the right side is going to be Mista in blue, and on the left side it is going to be Leenock playing as the red. Both are playing Chinese, a civilization that Leenock is very proficient with. Mista is a good Chinese player, but Leenock is an exceptional Chinese player, so for the first time in quite a long time, to be honest, in this set, I get the feel that Leenock could be going into this game with probably the player that has a slight advantage here. Looks like we already have a draw cup for Mista. Leenock was going to delay that dock here for a brief moment at least. He opened the house. That's basically our first point, or first decision point, to be honest. Whether or not you make that house first and then dock, or dock first, then house. Looks like Mista went to drop the dock first, and then only after that he dropped the house. Whereas on the other side, you could see Leenock dropping the house first, and only after that did he drop the dock. This is slightly more effective for Mista. He's gonna have like a 5 to 10 seconds advantage when it comes to popping that first fishing ship out. What's bigger though is that you will have a ton of sheep following here from Mista. You will definitely go very sleepy, counting so much sheep behind the scout of Mista here. Whereas for Leenock, if that's the only scout that he has, which seems to be the case, he has a quite underwhelming time collecting sheep. Of course, that's not going to be your primary priority, but as a fallback option, it's a great source of food for Mista, and it's definitely a great start for him being able to pick all of those up. First scout pops out here for Mista. He wants to push away that villager, and that he succeeds in. That's going to be a nice little extra here for him, because if you think about it, that villager is a short fishing villager, which is something that makes it very effective when it comes to gathering food. Leenock being pushed away from the shorefish is definitely something that's going to slightly slow down his food income. Meanwhile, Leenock could do the exact same thing to Mista's villager, and in fact, I would suspect that he's going to do that. You could see an Imperial Officer pop out just a second ago here for Leenock, so he's going to supervise that lumber camp. Whereas on the other side, I don't think that we have a supervisor just yet for Mista. Leenock definitely has one, and that's going to help a lot with the fishing ship production at the beginning. And on the other side, indeed, we don't have an Imperial Officer just yet for Mista. He's popping out the first one just now. He's mining a little bit of gold, whereas on the other side, Leenock is probably living off from tax revenue only. He has gotten 40 gold, which is a sign that he just picked up the tax from the lumber camp, and that's basically it. When you play hybrid map with Chinese and you make fishing eco, just like in the case of any other civilizations, you delay your feudal age. But that also means that you have more time to collect your tax revenue, so you are less reliant on mining gold, and you can probably live off the tax revenue that you get. Looks like gold mining will still be a thing here potentially for Leenock, and that can be important, and that will be important if you want to go to Song Dynasty. It looks like in terms of fishing eco, we do have slightly more for Leenock, as he's also harassing the villager of Mista. Mista, it looks like he's just sending over his scout to help out with that. I'm not sure if the villager will survive though, so you gotta be careful with this one. Should be able to fight back though. I think he should just fight back and just damage that scout as much as possible, because his own scout is doing a ton of damage over here. I'm really curious if Mista's gonna lose that villager or not. Looks like The tax revenue is working out over here, and the villager will survive. It's a low HP vill, though. Leenock will try to circle back and kill that. I'm fairly certain. Forward Barbican of the Sun being planned by both. Leenock sending what seems to be 8 villagers, Mista only 4, and indeed the villager goes down. So maybe it would have been better for Mista to pull that villager back, and it's going to be the Barbican of the Sun right next to the river. I wonder if the same positioning will be chosen by Leenock here. I think Leenock wants to place it, yeah, right over there. The face-off on the river, that's what you're looking for. Now, this basically guarantees that both players will be able to get that up, but it also means that they will have to relocate their fishing eco, so I would expect either of these players to preemptively start making a new dock elsewhere. Probably to the left for Leenock and to the right for Mista, because they know very well that they will lose the fishing eco the moment those Barbicans go up. So you will have to relocate your entire fishing eco. Seems to be slightly larger fishing ship numbers right now for Mista, as it looks like, as expected, the villagers will finish the Barbican slightly faster here for Leenock, having 8 building it. He didn't jump into the Barbican, though, to have some arrow fire coming out. He could have potentially killed some fishing ships. On the other side, Mista's going to do it differently. He is jumping into the Barbican, and he can focus down the fishing ships. Arrow fire is going to help a lot here, trying to put some pressure on the fishing ships. Looks like Leenock hasn't reacted yet, and he could lose that fishing ship. Indeed, the first one is getting taken down, and on the right side, Mista managed to relocate his fishing eco. Interesting fact. Oh, first galley popping out. That's actually a junk, to be precise. But it's the arrow ship popping out already for the Chinese player. I don't think that we have a junk coming for Mista, right? He has one queued up. Why are the fishing ships coming this way? What's going on? The fishing ships are coming this way to drop off the food, and that's a disaster. That's a disaster. One fishing ship gets intercepted, the other one was damaged, as we do have the food eco of Leenock partially relocated to the land area. He's supervising a mill right now. First junk coming out for both. Second junk already out for Leenock here. He only has 1 dock, whereas the opponent has 2, but he's idling the fishing eco of Mista, and that's never a good sign here, because he himself has a lot of fishing eco to fight against it. You could see Mista's face for a brief moment on the face cam on the top left, that he knows that he's in trouble. His own fishing eco is getting pressured very heavily. I'm really unsure what's happening to those fishing ships. Not exactly sure why he didn't drop off the food on the right side. I hope it's not a bug, because that would be a blunder if there was a serious bug like this in a key tournament game, but he definitely had a dock out there. The good news is that he still has the Barbican out there, and since Leenock didn't relocate his fishing eco, there's a chance for him to finish it off, and it looks like he's holding on to his own junks. There's a sneaky fishing ship repairing this junk over here. It looks like he loses one, though, and the second junk could be taken down as well. He was just trying to focus down the fishing ships, and as things stand, Mista is going to lose the river, and it's not looking good for him. It's not looking good at all. He has still 3 fishing ships in that dock. It looks like he's just now going to send out his junk to try and sink as much fishing eco as he can. Luckily for him, he gathered a lot of sheep at the beginning, so he's gonna have no trouble supervising that. That's the only positive thing right now for him. And he's going to take down most of the fishing eco for Leenock, so being honest, if you look at the overall eco numbers, those are comparable. Those are actually comparable, and Leenock probably doesn't believe that his opponent has given up on the water like that. Leenock is sending all the ships to the north, and Mista doesn't believe that he managed to take down all the fish himself. So neither of the players can really believe that they did quite a lot of damage to the opponent, and the opponent is just giving up on fishing at this point. But this is definitely something that helps Mista, because he was in a rough spot on the water. Imperial Academy now coming in for Leenock, so Song Dynasty is on the horizon, and his food count is already looking pretty decent, which means that we could potentially see Castle Age coming in a matter of seconds. Second town center coming in for Mista. He invested less into that fishing eco, and you can see he's now jumping into that dock over there, or is he? Yep, he jumped into the dock the last second. Second town center coming up. He does not have Song Dynasty though. So it is only Tang Dynasty second TC. He's got the gold for Song though, but at this point, he has a limited amount of food to work with. You can see at the bottom left that his food count is looking quite bad. He's still on stone. Could this be 3 town centers? That would be a little greedy. But if he can make sure he's not getting overrun by palace guards in Castle Age, it's going to be fine. The concerning thing here for Mista is that Leenock has 800 food in the bank, 400 gold. And whoever gets to Castle Age first could easily overrun the opponent with palace guards. Wouldn't be the first time that we see that. Villages being placed already by Leenock, as he's already in Song Dynasty. Whereas on the other side, it looks like it's still Tang Dynasty for Mista. He was still mining stone. It makes me wonder what he wants to do. He is not eligible to make stone walls in feudal age. He needs to get to castle age in order to be allowed to make stone walls. Mista has enough stone, in theory, for a third town center. But he doesn't have the wood for that, so I'm not exactly sure what he has on his mind. Second town center coming in for Leenock right now. Villager count slightly in the favor of Mista. He's piling up resources for what could be Castle Age or what could be Song Dynasty. On the other side, Leenock is definitely gathering resources for Castle Age here. He is already in Song. Wars are coming up on the southern part of the map by Leenock, just as well as the north. Imperial Academy on the way now for Mista, so he's just now going up to Song Dynasty. You get the feel that Mista is one step behind here, because his opponent is already up to Song Dynasty, both players with 2 town centers, but Leenock is getting close to Castle Age. The question becomes what exactly Mista's gonna do with the stone that he managed to gather. He's going to trade the light junk here to the junk of the opponent, and with that, Leenock will guarantee himself the possibility of walling off the southern part. I'm really curious at Mista's plan here. I'm not exactly sure if he knows that his opponent is already in Song Dynasty and on 2 town centers. He saw the second TC, but he might not know about the Song Dynasty yet. The other big question mark, as I said, and that's the thing that intrigues me the most, is why Mista is mining still some more stone. He's now down to 15 stone per minute, so he pulled away the villagers from stone. Makes me think that he wants to go for a third town center. But that's very risky against Chinese. You do that, and you basically tell your opponent, look, I'm not even focusing at all on my army. Oh, villager could be picked off. That could be massive. Villager gets taken down. Nice move from Mista. He's taking down that villager, opening up that wall, or at least making sure that it still remains open. His junk might be taken down by the ship here of Leenock, but it could be an even trade of junks, to be honest. So, getting close. I think it's going to be won by Mista. Yep, Mista wins that. Mista won the battle. His ship is one shot though, so it's going to be sunk by the Barbican anyways. Still, at least he keeps the wall open for the time being. Villages are now coming in. But that's a castle age on the way for Leenock. And as I said, the concerning thing when you are doing a very eco-heavy approach against Chinese is that they can overrun you with palace guards very easily. And I wouldn't be very surprised to see Leenock already dropping the barracks, because he knows that palace guards are the name of the game. Yup, there is the barracks. And the concern here for Mista is that he's not walled up back at home. So the palace guards can just rampage his eco. 54 villagers against 53. Still no use of that stone here for Mista. He wants to go to Castle Age. Maybe he changed his mind. I can see him thinking about a third town center, mining the stone for it, and then changing the mind, saying, look, it's going to be a little too risky. He's getting ready for Castle Age. If he can stall out the push of Leenock, he could still be in a good spot, but he needs to buy himself time. So he is very much in a position, like we have seen Leenock be in the previous game, having to buy yourself time to make sure that you can capitalize on that eco. And that's exactly what Mista needs to do in this game. First couple of palace guards making it through the river, and they will push away some of those gold miners. They can run back to the Barbican. Villager count right now is dead even. Mista did not notice those villagers getting picked off, but there is a junk coming out from him, and that's intercepting some palace guards coming through. That's a great way to damage them, thereby making it much more difficult for them to take good battles. Barbican is also working away against some of those palace guards. Mista himself has his own palace guards now, so he could potentially fight back over here. If he had a war junk and a river crossing, that would be even more effective, because the standard junk isn't doing a ton of damage to the palace guards. Still, every single palace guard that crosses the river for Leenock is going to be damaged, and that's definitely a good start here. Look at that, Leenock is pulling away the 2 palace guards from Mista to the right side with the scout, and he's sending in his own palace guards though. Mista is still catching up on the palace guard numbers, 6 versus 4, but Mista has been losing villagers left and right here, and there is still a couple of villagers to be potentially killed here. Now, the trickle of palace guards might slow down here, and this could give a window for Mista to sort of regroup. There's a junk as well now, I see. It's actually a war junk even from Leenock, so he's trying to sink that galley, and with that, he would once again have control over that crossing, allowing him to trickle in some more palace guards. Palace Guards fighting it off on the right side. The concern here for Mista is that he was cut off from food for some time. He was relying very heavily on that hunt, and he didn't have access to it, and he's yet to transition to farming eco, at least on a serious level. You see he had like 4 or 5 farms. He's going to have a decent amount of Palace Guards now, but those raids getting into his eco and killing one villager left, one villager right, those are going to be difficult to deal with, and you see his lumberjacks are once again being killed. While we're looking at this, I just want to highlight one thing. It happened a couple of hours ago now, but remember game number 1, where Mista was leading so convincingly, and then just 5 knights killed his entire wood eco? First of all, something very similar is happening. No reaction on those lumberjacks being killed. But after that game number 1, I said that this is a game that shouldn't have been lost, and this is a game that could really backfire should this go to 7 games. We might see Mista falling not even necessarily on this game, but potentially on that game number 1, because right now, he's behind by 13 villagers. And as I said, Leenock is an exceptional Chinese player, one of the most dangerous Chinese players out there. And in a Chinese mirror, of course, he's going to be more than happy to take this one into game number 7. Boy oh boy, is Mista in trouble. Army numbers looking comparable right now, but this is the thing. When the army numbers are comparable, your opponent has a 16 villagers lead. It's getting more and more difficult. I'm just looking at the hand movement of Mista, not exactly sure what he's doing. He's tapping out. I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure if Mista is indeed tapping out, but boy oh boy he does. He realized that there is no shot at this. He realized that there is no shot, and Mista, heartbreaking defeat here for him because he was so close yet so far. Leenock lives to see another day. And after falling down 3-1, he's able to take it back for free. What an exceptional set. Mista really has shown why he's one of the best Age of Empires 4 players out there. Taking Leenock to game number 7, and I really feel like, as weird as it sounds like, it's that game number 1 that just went so horrible for Mista. And in the end, I think the biggest thing here, despite the fact that both players played at an exceptional level and someone has to lose, this time around, that was Mista who take the loss. And I really feel like just some small things going badly and then just escalating out of control was what snowballed things here for Mista. If you think about it, as I said, for example, the fishing eco in this game, but more importantly, I think the story of the set is game number 1. Mista had like 70 villagers over 35, and that was a game that was so close to being won. It was a miracle that Leenock came back into that one. That started to give him some momentum, and then Mista was up to 3-1. We played the HRA mirror in the second to last game. That was a close one as well. Mista seemed like he might be able to close that out as well. And in the end, in the Chinese one, I really feel like this is a game, the Chinese matchup, where Leenock is probably the favorite simply because he plays so much Chinese and he's really effective with that civilization. In the end, Mista falls to Leenock 4-3. Heartbreaking defeat for him, but of course, still, it's a great run for him to be in the top 6. In the end, he's going to finish N4C with quarterfinals, and Leenock lives to see another day and goes into the semifinals tomorrow.